This week on NWP, the crystals shed their light silently. Nerds Without Pants, episode 42. I am Julian, and I'm joined, as always, by Patrick.
All right.
Angelo.
Hi.
Now, you see, right there what? Should have been the Spoony Bard.
Should it have?
Like, it really should have.
I should have been you, Spoony Bard?
Yeah, we'll just work it in later.
Yeah.
Yeah, disappointed.
I was thinking FF1. Earth Begins to Rot and all that stuff.
And we are joined once again by repeat special guest, friend of the show, and everyone's favorite authority on JRPGs. We have Erika Szabo.
Hello.
Thanks
for having me again.
Wonderful to have you back. In case you don't listen to it, you should definitely check out Erika guesting with me and Angelo on Backlog is Anonymous for Asura's Wrath. That was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to rope her into this, which is going to be our big Final Fantasy extravaganza. We're not going to do any Consumption Junction. We're not going to talk about what we did in the last couple weeks, because quite honestly, I could probably fill a good 4-hour podcast with this stuff easily, and we'll try to keep it to, like some sort of reasonable level. But this has just kind of been bubbling to the top. If you've been listening to the show for the last few episodes, Final Fantasy has been coming up quite a bit, and I thought it was time to finally just get it all out, because apparently me writing an exhaustive half-year-long retrospective last year wasn't enough for me. I still have things to say. And I think it's a good time to do it too, because while Square Enix kind of let the 25th anniversary come and go last year with little fanfare, we basically got Theat Rhythm, and I guess we got the, PlayStation 3 version of Final Fantasy 14. They kind of picked this year to unleash the floodgates, where we have Lightning Returns, Final Fantasy 13. We have Final Fantasy 10 HD Collection, which I just bought literally minutes before we started recording this. We have Final Fantasy 14 coming out for the PlayStation 4 very soon. And of course we have Bravely Default, which, while it's not officially a Final Fantasy game, it's basically a Final Fantasy game.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, just...
Ooh. Did you know, real quick, about that Bravely Default thing? There is a way to get one of the characters to dress as an Onion Knight.
That's cool.
Yeah. It's just a thing. How much more obvious could this be? So, more to your point.
I mean, I guess my thing would be is there a Dark Knight in there?
There is indeed.
See, okay. That's my thing. The Dark Knight is my jam, so I would have to see the Dark Knight and see how spiky his armor is.
Not very, but one of his abilities is fantastic. It is my favorite ability, and I wish I could figure out a way to work it into a strategy of some sort.
Would that be Soul Eater?
No, it's called See You in Hell. And basically what happens is, if your Dark Knight is killed, he comes back from the dead, yells "See you in hell" and deals 3 times damage and then dies.
I love it.
It's outstanding.
I've always loved the Dark Knight abilities, on Final Fantasy 11. Mm-hmm. One of the big weapon skills is Guillotine. And then your 2-hour is Blood Weapon, and, of course, Soul Eater. It's all so dark. Just listen to Linkin Park and cut yourself while you're playing.
Ooh.
Literally, because that's kind of what the Dark Knight does, is he, wounds himself to do damage. No, but anyway...
My Linkin Park stage was more like Ocarina of Time simultaneously. That's what I was really playing. I guess that's why I like it so much.
Yeah, well, the ongoing joke in Final Fantasy 11 with the Dark Knights was that they were so dark and brooding that all they did was sit in their mog houses all day long and listen to Linkin Park.
Jeez.
But yeah, we are here to talk about all things Final Fantasy. Well, I guess not all things Final Fantasy. We kind of want to keep it to the core series. So that's 1 through 14. Not really trying to go into the spin-offs like Crystal Chronicles or Tactics or Mystic
Shows
Quest.
above, you see.
Yeah.
Adventure, Legends 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, those games have their places, but not in this discussion.
Mhm.
We'll probably talk a little bit about the sequels as far as like 10-2 and 13-2, but probably to a minimum because I kind of want to focus on the core series. But I think to start off, the best way to do it, it's kind of a 1-2 punch, or actually a 1-2-3 punch. Giving, like, going around the room and giving, like, our beginning stories of Final Fantasy, like how we got into it, and also real quick, what our favorite and least favorite games in the series are. Now, Angelo, I know you've told your story a few times on the show, so we'll probably gloss over yours, but Patrick, I don't know if you've told, like, your story. Somehow I want to say that 7 was your first?
Yeah, it definitely was.
Okay. So we'll start with you.
Yeah, well, like all posers who started their RPGs during like the PS1 and PS2 generation, Final Fantasy VII was my first RPG. It'll probably always be my favorite though because of that. Like I never experienced something like it before, and it was like, honestly, I got my PS2 because I had a 64, and they didn't really have any RPGs like that. Or any that I played at least. So when I got the PS2, I went back and played Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9 like right away when there weren't many games out, like after launch. And it was honestly like one of the best experiences ever. It was like more than I thought a game could ever be, and it probably changed my idea of like what I could write in a game and like how people could form pop culture even, and like I could be a part of it, and I felt like I went on a journey and everything more so than like ever before, that I like had come of age or something because of Cloud's, uprising, and I don't know, I know it's nostalgic and everything now, but I don't think anything will ever top it.
And just knowing you and how creative and poetic you are, I can imagine that just the out there story of Final Fantasy VII would have like just blown your mind.
Mm-hmm. It was like exactly what I wanted for years, and like I'd seen it advertised, and I couldn't play it because I didn't have the right system, and I was just thinking about that giant ass sword, and it was like the first thing I got, and of course it was the greatest hits version, but I was young anyway, and I didn't know that I should have gotten the black version that I saw next to it.
Yeah, because back then they were still like probably the same price. Like now, there's quite a large gap between the values of those two different versions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was like, I'm going to show it off to people. Be like, oh, this is huge. Like, everyone buys it. That's why I'm playing it. No.
Now, did you ever go back and explore some of the pre-7 ones, or?
Unfortunately, I haven't really made it back to them yet. I was just kind of too young and didn't really play RPGs at that age when they were coming out, so.
That's fair. Yeah.
I should have went back and played like the 3DS remakes and stuff like that, but just somehow it never happened.
Yeah, and actually like those GBA ones, which are great like retranslations of those Super Nintendo ones, are actually also kind of expensive now.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like since 7, I have not missed a title except for 11 because I didn't play MMOs, but I'm going to change that with 14.
That's right. So of those, I mean, you basically have played almost half the series because, you haven't really played 14 yet, but what was your least favorite of those games?
Honestly, I love them all so much. Like, they're all going to be my babies no matter what. And I may not love them as much as you do, Julian, but like, on a personal level, they're always going to signify like a journey of discovery and heightened understanding. But then there's Blitzball. And I hate that game. And that's like the only thing I really dislike in Final Fantasy is like to the core. I wanted that game to be so good when I first saw it like advertised, and it looked so fast paced, and you go above the water and do these bicycle kicks that look like soccer. I thought it was going to be quick like FIFA, and then it turns into this slow game.
With random stats.
Yes.
Like, yeah.
And no matter how hard I tried, I could never get Wakka's like ultimate weapon, and it was like one of the only things I really quit. Man, I played so much, and I knew I had to play so much more to get that weapon, and I was just not having fun with it at all. And it stalled my whole journey.
Wait, you did the lightning bolt thing? Or am I getting confused?
No.
The lightning bolt thing is in 10.
Yeah, you did that?
Yuna's? No.
No, Riku's.
Riku's.
Did you do that where you had to dodge like the 100 times with the lightning bolt? I had no patience for that.
I'm just asking. You said you did nearly everything. So.
Oh, I didn't do nearly everything. I just meant like that's one of the only things I quit. Like, yeah, I played a lot of the side stories in the games. Like I beat the red weapon in 7, but I never beat the final boss in 7 because I don't want to finish the game.
Wait, what? You've never beat Sephiroth?
I
got to the final form and I've heard One Winged Angel a bunch of times, but I always just like die on purpose.
Alrighty then.
Well, it's a little different than what I do.
I was like, when I was like playing the game, I heard that there was going to be a remake, and I was like, oh, I'll just wait until the remake comes out to beat it.
Yeah, that's not happening. You just go ahead.
But now at this point, it's so legendary that like of a game in my mind that I don't ever want to see the conclusion. I don't think. That's like how this started. You know how I haven't beaten A Link Between Worlds yet either. I'm like right at the final boss.
Oh my god. I mean, I do understand that mentality because I do, like, towards the end of an RPG, especially one that I've really been loving, I start to, like, drag my feet a little bit because I don't want it to end, but there's also that part where I want to see that final cinematic, and the last cinematic for Final Fantasy VII is really good. You get to see, like, Tifa in all her booby glory, because, like, they didn't really show the characters too much in the CG for 7, so you get, like, a last really good look at all the characters, and there's also that really nice little last showdown with Sephiroth and Cloud. You really owe it to yourself to do that.
I know. I'll see it someday.
Fair enough. Erika, how about you? Like, where did you start with the series and favorite and least favorite?
You know, what really sucked is I had I had so much hype for the PlayStation 1 because I was getting like multiple game magazine subscriptions and stuff, and I was like hearing about all these games that I was just fascinated with, like the Final Fantasy games, but my mom never let me have a PS1. So
sad panda.
Yeah, really sad panda. So it took me a little longer. Like I had played ROMs, but my first Final Fantasy to actually like really sit down with wasn't until I got the PlayStation 2, and I played Final Fantasy 8 actually because I love the visuals so much for the game, and all I ever saw in like EGM was just like how beautiful it was, you know? And I played that, which is really ironic because I don't really like the game anymore. So, but then I ended up playing 7, and I moved to, I had a friend who had 6. I played at her house and we played together, which is really nice how you're able to do that actually. How you could do like multiplayer.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you if people don't know, like on Final Fantasy VI, you can actually assign characters to a second controller and they are responsible for the inputs.
It was crazy. Yeah, and I knew I played it before, like on a ROM or something, but never to that extent, and that really, really blew my mind. So, I played 10 not long after, and then I delved back into 4 because I really wanted to see that one for myself too, because I had heard it was so good. I played 1 and 2, and then I finally played 9. 9 was like one of the last ones I played until 12, which is crazy because I think that's my favorite one. It's funny how my first one was my least favorite and my last one was my most favorite.
I was going to say, it sounds like you picked a really good out of order to go in.
Yeah, I mean, I love the kind of haphazard way of experiencing the series, but I think you also, I mean, considering that it's like every game is so different from each other, you kind of get a really nice kind of cross section of what that franchise is about.
Yeah. I got it really well. Like, it's strange though, because like for a long time, like growing up, like I was totally obsessed with 8. And I think it's because it was my first one and I just loved how it looked visually. But just as I grew up, I was just like, I don't know, I found more and more things that turned me off, and I started getting to a point where like I couldn't really ignore a lot of the game's faults, and it has a lot of faults and it has a lot of parts in it where I just felt like it was very sloppy. I can't remember what the big city was called, like the biggest city in the game, and it ended up being like just a total like farce. Like you could hardly even like explore the place.
Baum Garden
yeah.
or
No, that's Balam Gardens is like your first place that you go to. I don't remember
Right,
the
okay.
big city.
Yeah, no, I'll probably think of it in a bit. But yeah, it was a very strange order for me, but it was such a magical moment for me because I'd never played any JRPGs until then. So it was just an amazing gateway, just such an amazing gateway into the genre. I couldn't be happier.
I find it really interesting that 9 ended up being one of your favorites because typically, and I say this as someone who was working retail at the time, the people who cut their teeth on 7 and 8 really recoiled against 9 because they felt that it wasn't a Final Fantasy game where it was actually, this big love letter from the original team to, how things used to be before moving on to, the next generation. So I just find that amazing that, like, you picked, like, the most traditional of, like, the 3D Final Fantasies as the one that you really love. I think it's really cool.
I loved how colorful the characters were, and I really just wanted a true fantasy. I wanted something that really embodied all of that. And some of the others didn't so much, and that's not to say that's, bad in any way. Like, I loved 7's atmosphere. I loved how dark it was, and it was very atmospheric, and I kind of like that in 8 as well, where it was trying to be kind of more like contemporary. It took a lot of influences from modern architecture and all this stuff. Now I remember the place. It's Esthar or Esther, whatever. The big city. Yeah. Yeah, I'm like going off all over the place. That was like the most futuristic place there. But yeah, I don't know. I understand why people like those games, but I just want like true fantasy to the core,
No, I'm definitely right there with you. I mean, we'll get into it later on because I think everybody on this podcast is a lot more positive on the series than most podcasts that you'll listen to about video games. But at the same time, I will acknowledge that the series has lost a little bit of its luster for me, and part of that is that I miss that fantasy aspect to Final Fantasy, and ever since Cloud, I've found it really weird when the dude brings a knife to a gunfight, literally. When, like, you're fighting guys with machine guns, and you've got a sword, there's just something weird about that to me.
Yeah.
It's easy if you remember that Cloud's on drugs.
True. But, I mean, what about Squall and, well, I guess not so much Tidus, because there wasn't really a lot of technology in there, but you know what I mean, like, like trying to square the sci-fi stuff with the fantasy stuff is a little weird. Right up to the point that I really don't know how I feel about 15. Part of me likes the idea of like these Final Fantasy monsters coming into the real world, because like that scene with the behemoth in like basically like it looks like the streets of like London or something. Like that kind of appeals to me, but at the same time it's like if I don't get to go into a fantasy setting also, like, I don't know. But we can talk about that later. But Erika, so I guess 8 would probably be your least favorite?
Yeah, unfortunately. There was just, it was so broken, in my opinion, in terms of not only the battle system, but I felt like the pacing for the story was a little strange, and I felt like it really, it pushed a lot of characters under the rug. In the end, it was just all about Squall and Rinoa. If you really like Squall and Rinoa, you'll love it, but if you actually start considering the other characters, it gets a little upsetting, the more I play it.
Especially,
and I thought I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say especially because it was like billed as the big romantic Final Fantasy, but I feel like it's like the biggest cock tease of a romance I've ever seen in a video game, because there's really, like, Squall has all these deep thoughts about Rinoa in his head that he never expresses, and it's the most frustrating thing to watch.
It really is, yeah.
I really like the CGI in that game, though, the ship battles in it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the game was gorgeous.
Yeah, there was
beautiful.
there's that one panning shot across the battlefield, and like people are throwing magic at each other, and people are fighting. It was a beautiful FMV. I still think about it. It was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And also the way, I mean, 7 did this a little bit, but the way that they would work in, like, the polygonal, models in with, like, the CG backgrounds was really cool. Like, I definitely remember that.
And it definitely was a lot better than they looked in 7 when they did that.
Yeah. Probably doesn't hold up too well now. It's weird because, like, 8 is, like, the game that I would least like to revisit, like, conceptually, but at the same time, I keep kind of wanting to. And I think part of that, and we'll get into it later because we're definitely going to talk about music, but looking back, I think that 8 might be one of Uematsu's strongest scores, even though it's one of my least favorite games in the series. But, like, going back and listening to some of that music, I'm like, yeah, like, I'd kind of like to just, like, wander this world just to hear this stuff for hours on end.
Really beautiful.
I think it was one of the scores he was definitely, like, listening to it, it sounds like he was the most invested in it, but I don't think it's his best.
Oh, no. I don't think it's his best, but I think it's definitely up there. And it's something that I didn't appreciate the first time around. It actually took me buying a bunch of, like, remixed albums and stuff like that and rearranged scores, and I was like, and also I've noticed, and we can get into it later, but I have noticed that when Uematsu picks, like, selections for, like, certain compilation albums, or for, like, the playlist for his, like, Distant Worlds concerts, 8 seems to come up a lot, and I do feel that he's very proud of that score.
Definitely.
So Angelo, I mean, I know, like, we'll kind of go a little quick on your origin, just because, you know, we have heard it a couple times, but, you know, real quick, like, how you started with the series, and then, you know, first, or favorite and least favorite.
I mean, I guess if you look at it, I'm like the old schooler. You know, I started with 1 and worked my way up from there. I honestly skipped over a lot of the Super Nintendo games. I skipped the Super Nintendo games almost entirely. Like, I played a little bit of them, but never got sucked into them. Played 6, played very, very little 4, and then got kind of reintroduced to RPGs, if you will, with the PlayStation. And, yeah, we've already been over that, so I'm not going to really recycle that. But I would say, you know, if you're talking about favorite games, the original, probably mostly for nostalgia, but definitely because for some reason I know that game so well that it's one of my favorites. I think sometimes you just get that way with certain things, whether or not they're good, you just love them. And I can definitely look at it and tell you exactly how it's broken, and exactly where it's broken, and exactly what makes it broken, and I love it anyway, because it was my first RPG, so... Or my first JRPG of that style. So.
Now, real quick, I'm just curious, did you beat, like, the NES version?
Yes.
Wow. I'm fist bumping you, like, across the country right now, because I've never been able to play the NES version for long, and part of that is just because, like, problems with, like, the old hardware as far as, like, the saves go. You know, the problem is that I've run into is that my game might be a little dusty and it doesn't fire right away. So you take it out to, like, blow on it, but then you didn't hold on the reset button, so there's your save. You know, that's happened to me more than once. But then also, like, it was such an archaic RPG, and it was the one where... And they fixed this in re-releases, and that's why I prefer to play it on PS1 or Game Boy Advance. But, you know, it would be that thing where you would target an enemy, but then the character before you would kill that enemy, but then the second character would still go ahead and attack that empty spot. It made the battles really slow.
It made them slow, but it also made you have to really, really think about what you were doing. And I mean, you did not want to waste a high damage fighter on something that you were probably going to knock out. So maybe you'd have a mage do melee damage to it instead, you know, or something like that. And I think, I know you hate that about it, but I also kind of like that about it because it makes me think about every single action I take, which a lot of times now, if you enter a game and you, are choosing commands and choosing fight, you just hold down the button to auto attack everything. And where's the strategy in that?
This is true, and it's something I would probably appreciate more now, but definitely when I was trying to play it back in the day, no me gusta.
Yeah, it took me, as I've talked about this before, it took me some getting used to that game, but once I did, I absolutely loved it. And I basically beat it twice because what I did was I beat it once on the NES. I started a second run through of all white mages because somebody told me that was possible and I really wanted to try it, and I got stuck on the part where I forget the names of the characters, unfortunately, but there's a king that you find out is like some dark elf, and you have to kill him, and that boss fight I'm just stuck on. If I were to put that card in, I'll bet that save is still there. Anyway, and then I played it again when the PlayStation remake of that first game came out, but I adjusted all the settings, so it was just like the original, so it didn't auto-forward attacks. It did basically it was the same exact game. I put the difficulty all the way up to hard.
Oh, can you do that?
Yes.
I'll have to give that a try sometime.
You have to go into the settings, but you can do it.
Cool.
So, yeah, I really like that game. I also, in hindsight, have come to like 6. I played 7 to completion before I played 6 to completion. So, I appreciate it in hindsight. And, yeah, the first time I played it, I was like, oh, it's this game again, and just kind of let it go. Even though, I don't know what happened, but for some reason, like the story, I was just like, story, meh. And then 7 was what made me go, okay, this story thing, this isn't such a bad thing. And then I went and played 6 and go, okay, why did I miss this? So, I really like 6, I really like 7, and I really like 9. I would say my least favorites, not that I don't like 4, but if I were to pick my favorites, that would be them. I would say my least favorites are probably 2 and 8. So, that's me.
Oh, yeah. I actually thought you were gonna
elaborate?
Well, no, I thought you were gonna like tear 2 up, but I guess we've kind of done that a couple times on this show.
2 is broken, and 2 is broken, and therefore I want to play 2. Like, there is something in me that goes, I want to play this game, and I want to do it right, and I want to experience what it was, because I liked Final Fantasy Legend 1, 2, and 3, which are basically the sequels to Final Fantasy 2, because the same guy who developed the battle engine for that went on to make the Saga games, and those are the first 3 Saga games. So there's something there, but I also, on the other hand, want nothing to do with that game ever again, because it's so broken. And 8, it was like Erika was saying, it just drags. And it's also just meh, I was so excited for that game when it came out. And, got it as soon as I could, played it as soon as I could. I don't know what disc I got to, but I couldn't finish it. It bored me.
And I feel like 8 was the easiest one to overpower your characters with system.
Oh, easily with the draw system? Yeah, you could I remember having a level 13 Zell, and he had 9999 hit points. And I could have done that with his strength, I could have done it with anything, and it was just because and I mean, you have the choice, you don't have to draw all that, magic from enemies, but the fact that you have that opportunity to, if you're grinding, then it's gonna happen regardless, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there was one of the first summons you had to fight, and I know I had to grind, towards the beginning for it. And yeah, it was stupid.
And how you're
kidding me.
It was also stupid how you had to, cast a certain spell, right, to get the summon, and you sometimes wouldn't know if that was the place or the boss to cast it, or you'd forget.
Yeah.
And then you just wouldn't have the summon the whole game.
That's true. That's so true. Yeah.
Does that have something to do with affinity? I don't remember. It's been a while.
I don't know. I know that I played Final Fantasy VIII wrong because, and I don't know how this happened, but I know that the whole junctioning stuff didn't really click for me, but also somehow I ended up having a level 100 Squall, and everybody else was I think the next highest character was level 40 or 50, and then my lowest was level 20, because I think I just really did not like Quistis, or Selfie. Is it Selfie? It's not.
Yeah, the banana girl is Selfie, and Hot for Teacher is Quistis, so.
Oh man, her name is Selfie, isn't it? That's kind of funny now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me take a selfie.
It's perfect.
But yeah, but see, the problem is that Final Fantasy VIII, and I think it's the only game in the series that does this, the enemies scale to your strongest character. So it took me literally over an hour to beat the last boss in that game because, it was leveled to Squall. Meanwhile, the rest of my characters were woefully underpowered, and I literally used everything in my arsenal that I had. And the only reason that I won is because, I had the Bahamut card, from the card game. And, you could basically convert the cards into items if you wanted to, forego, the card game. And if you trade in the Bahamut card, you get 100 mega elixirs. So it was just a war of attrition. I was anytime that I took damage, mega elixir. I basically just waited her out. It was awful.
Wow. That was a fun game though in 8.
Yeah, it was. It was better than the one in 9, because the one in 9, it was like, I know that the rules kept changing from town to town.
Yeah, I like that though. I thought it was cool. Like, switched it up a bit.
I just never got, I guess I never got down like the basic rules, so then when they started like changing them up, I was like, well, I'm done. I don't know what's going on anymore.
I got every single card in 9 for Tetramaster, except for one, because like right in the beginning of the game, there's a jump roping part. And if you can jump rope, like as VV, like 100 times, then you got this card. And I think that was also how you got Garnet's, or Dagger's ultimate weapon. And I just could not do it. I had no patience, no timing whatsoever. Couldn't do it.
Nope, yeah. I wouldn't do it either.
Yeah. I care for my time too much. Yeah. Even at 20 when that game came out. Well, I was 20 when that game came out.
Sounds eerily reminiscent of the Lightning in 10, and I just can't get behind one of those journeys. It just seems like it's pointless. I don't know why I'm doing it, like, for this one.
But you'll do it for that gold trophy on the HD collection, won't you, Patrick?
I might.
So, I don't think I've actually told, like, my beginnings with this series on this show, which seems kind of strange to me. Like Angelo, I started with 1, but not really. I went back to Ohio to, we were visiting my grandparents, and my old, best friends, Zach and Colby, like I hadn't seen them in years, and, we went to go visit them, and Zach had a collection of NES games, like, in the double digits, which was mind-blowing to me, because, like, I never knew people that had more than, like, 2 or 3 games, and he had, like, 20 or more, and I was like, this is amazing, I can play, like, all the games. And at the time, he was playing Final Fantasy 1, and it looked really interesting to me. I had never seen anything like it, I didn't know anything about it. And I just happened to, like, pop it in. Like, he was out of the room for some reason, so I popped it in, started a new game, and fooled around with it, and he saw what I was doing, and he was like, no! Don't save! Because he was, like, right at the end of the game. But it whet my appetite just enough so that, and this would have been 91, so, like, I think the Super Nintendo was already out. So when I got back home to Texas, and I was hanging out with my cousin David, who had a Super Nintendo, we went to the video store, as kids my age would do, because you couldn't afford these games. Go to rent something for the week. And I saw there was this game called Final Fantasy 2. And I was like, hey, that's that game that I played at Zach's house. It looked really interesting. So we rented that, and it just consumed us for a week. Just could not put it down. I mean, the sense of discovery was so amazing, because the cast of Final Fantasy 4/2 is so huge. Especially compared to, like, the newer games. I mean, it seemed like every corner that you would turn, like, somebody new was joining your party. And, it also had, like, 5 people in your party max, so there was, like, just a lot going on in that game, and it really impressed me. And, I was gonna say that, that there's this prevailing theory that your first Final Fantasy is your favorite, but then Erika kind of, like, shattered that for me. But it's true, because Final Fantasy IV remains my favorite game in the series. I have played it more than probably any game as far as, like, number of times through. I've got it practically memorized. I have bought every version that they've released. It's kind of a sickness. I mean, I kind of do that with all the Final Fantasy games, but especially that one. Like, I will go out of my way. So to the point that I actually have, like, partially played games of, like, the Game Boy Advance, DS remakes, and PSP versions. Like, they're all right around the same part. These days I tend to get to, the part where you find Yang and he doesn't remember who you are. And I just end up, like, getting to there, and for some reason I walk away. I don't know why. I love that game. But, no, it's just, like, the soundtrack, the characters, the melodrama. It's a dark game. I mean, people die left and right, or you think they're dead and they leave your party, and, like, there's that really depressing music every time somebody's gone, and, I don't know, there's really nothing else like it. Although in recent years I've come to feel that 6 is probably, I can say that 6 is the best game in the series, just objectively. I think that 6 might be their masterpiece in the sense that it almost feels like it's on a different level, artistically and story-wise, and the themes it was dealing with. I mean, teen pregnancy and racism and suicide and love and death and the struggle of the weak against the strong. I mean, there's so much in that game. And of course the soundtrack is amazing, and Kefka is one of the greatest villains this period. So I can say that, even though 4 always has the number one position in my heart, I kind of got to give it to 6. And yeah, and we've talked about it, but yeah, 2 can just go to hell. That is my least favorite game in the series. And I've played through it all the way twice. I played through it on the PlayStation remake, and I played through it on the Game Boy Advance Dawn of Souls remake. And I don't know, that game is so busted where, you're doing really fine, and then you take one step to the left, and all of a sudden you get one-shotted. And then there's also that whole part where the key to success is just having everybody dual-wield weapons up until the last couple hours of the game, where all of a sudden magic becomes really important. But you haven't been using magic because dual-wielding is so cool. So, yeah, no. No. And it boggles my mind too, because that was the second game. And I just try to put myself in the mindset of a Japanese player who played Final Fantasy 1 for hundreds of hours, replayed it over and over, and then Final Fantasy 2 comes out, and that's the sequel. And how does that franchise continue from that point? I don't know how that happened.
Yeah, I don't know. They made a really big mistake though. They took a risk, and it's good that they took the risk, but it was not a well thought out risk.
I think what it boils down to is the rebound with 3 was better than the fail with 2, because there was nothing like 3 out when 3 came out.
True. And I mean, to be fair, 2 did really well in Japan, when it came out. I'm just surprised that it did well because it's such a departure, but at the same time, they kind of also laid the groundwork for what the series is, which is ever changing. I'm just surprised that, because it's a complete, there's really very little in Final Fantasy 2 that is, held over from Final Fantasy 1. It's a completely different game. It has chocobos.
Yes.
There's a guy in there named Sid, which technically there wasn't even that in the first game, so I don't know.
The only thing the first game had was airships. That's the only thing that and Bahamut was introduced in the first one.
Right, and of course, like the jobs and little things like that, but yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I guess to expand and kind of going into the next topic, for me, and Erika, you kind of touched on this as well, and Patrick, but Final Fantasy, 4, 2 when it was here in the States originally, it kind of opened my eyes to this whole new type of gameplay, whole new type of game really, and I think that's really where I made that conscious decision that, video games weren't just a toy for me. They were something that was going to be part of my life for a long time because it just stirred me emotionally. And I remember, finally getting to the end of that game, and I didn't beat Final Fantasy IV for a long time because what we would do is we would always just rent the game and start from the beginning. So I know the first few hours of that game better than any other game. But it probably wasn't until I had my own Super Nintendo, which would have been 94, that I finally beat that game. And, finally getting to see those credits roll and that ending music and stuff was just I don't know, it touched me in a way that few things have. And the series has always been one of the most important things for me, like just as far as like, you know, I mean, all of this stuff, you know, when we were talking about all our geeky stuff is like, it's not important in the grand scheme of things, but there's also something to be said about, you know, this stuff. I mean, it is important because it does touch you, you know, on an emotional level, and, you know, you spend enough time with this stuff and it just becomes ingrained into your psyche. And Final Fantasy has always been that for me. And since Final Fantasy VII, I have purchased every major release, on day one. You know, like I have not broken my streak yet. Not counting stuff like, I mean, yes, I bought Final Fantasy X HD today, but I don't really count that because it's a re-release. But, you know, 1 through 14 I have bought on day one. 7 through 14 on day one. And I don't know, that's kind of my little claim to fame with the series. And I finished them all except for Final Fantasy V, which, there's something about that game, I just can't finish it. I don't know. I want to. I've tried multiple times, but it just does not hold me. But, I kind of wanted to go around and, you know, like talk about what the franchise means to us and maybe some of our favorite, like, memories, you know, throughout the years. Like maybe, it doesn't even have to be like something in the game. It could be something tangentially related to the game that, you know, that you experienced, like maybe, you know, a launch event that you went to or something like that. So, I guess we'll start with you, Angela, because we kind of went, you know, we'll go back around the other way. Give us the feels.
The feels?
I want the feels.
Goodness. I don't even know. It's been a roller coaster with this franchise. I think anybody that's been with it since the beginning could say that, because you go from being ecstatic to being disappointed almost on a regular basis. And I don't necessarily mean that, like, it's bad, but sometimes you're just expecting a lot more than it delivers, and then sometimes it just blows you away. Like, I was not prepared for what 7 was. I just wasn't. You know, I don't think anybody really was, because video games had not done what Final Fantasy VII did. And I mean, if you're talking about emotions, you know, Final Fantasy I gave me this whole sense of exploration and discovery, and yeah, you know, part of the feeling, you know, part of the feels of Final Fantasy I was feeling like I was involved in something deep and complex and over my childhood head, you know? And the fact that I could overcome this made me feel like just amazing. So I think that's more of the feeling than anything else, because in parts, especially to a child, there's some things in that game that are just obtuse and unfriendly and play on tropes that haven't been established yet, you know? So unraveling all that, and yeah, you know, I asked friends and I used guides and I did I did what I had to do to get it done, but I got it done. So, there was that. And then when Final Fantasy VII rolls around, you know, there's something that everybody talks about when they talk about Final Fantasy VII, and we're gonna get there. We knew we were gonna get there eventually, right? As far as feelings go.
You're of course talking about the Golden Saucer.
Yeah. I mean, no. Although that FMV when you're approaching the Golden Saucer is very cool. That is the best part of the Golden Saucer.
The worst part would be the part where you have to listen to that music of the Golden Saucer.
Over and over and over again. There's a couple, when we get to talking about music, Final Fantasy VII is so binary when it comes to that. It's either like, oh, this is so good, or, oh my gosh, make it stop, but no, we're gonna loop this forever.
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
Yeah.
Patrick is a Golden Saucer apologist.
I got the ticket where you could go in as many times as you want, and I'm pretty sure, like, I did all the motorcycle races and everything. I don't remember too much of it. I was pretty young at the time, but I don't know. I was so naive where I thought that everything was good in that game.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that was the first time I had actually felt an emotional impact from a character dying, was in Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even like I was fully able to realize the gravity of the situation, because as we talked about before, the romance wasn't very well done necessarily, or the chemistry, I should say. It never really evolved into a romance, but the chemistry between Cloud and Aerith was never, or Aerith, I guess, depending on who you talk to, was just not fully realized, at least in English, in my opinion. But still, it was like, oh, yeah, well, she'll get up, right? She's not getting up. Holy crap, she's not getting up. What's going on? You know what I mean? And it was just like, wow, she actually died. And she's actually no longer in my party. And she was a fundamental member of my party, because I knew enough at that point to know that if I threw her in the back line and just weighed her down with all my spell materia, she was nuclear. Like, I had her in my party, and I was using her, and then she disappeared and went on this weird thing, and, and then okay, we're gonna get her back now. Nope, you don't get her back. And it was just devastating from all sorts of different weird angles that I just hadn't gotten from a game before. And, that did get me invested in that game, and that did give it that much more expediency, I would say, or I don't know what the right word is, but it made it more urgent.
And also I think it's a very powerful scene because I think Sephiroth as a character had been a very sympathetic character.
Yes.
Right up until that moment, and then that is the moment where it's like, you've got to die.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, up until that moment, to be honest, I was more interested in Genova than I was him. I was like, okay, yeah, he's a freak like me. We'll figure this out. But what's this alien that crash landed it and started this whole thing? And then, okay, we'll figure out the alien later. You need to go.
But then those Ares for me, was the first thing that you see in the game, and she's like this innocent girl, picking up the flowers, and it's like the most serene image you could start off in a dystopian society, and the beacon of hope. And for me, I'd never seen a person die so early in a game, and I was just shocked completely.
Well, they set something up from the very beginning, too, about what this is about. It's this girl who is pure and innocent, who sells, these flowers that she grows in fertile ground in a church, warming herself in front of a Mako furnace, that kind of a thing. It's this whole clash of this chemical, mechanical, unnatural thing versus this innocent, pure. I read way too deep into things. I'm sorry.
No, I honestly.
It's so true.
Yeah.
And then, then you see this force that represents the insanity of the world basically called into being by the conflict of these two forces destroy her. And it's like, whoa, I mean, this is all stuff that I realize now, too. So that there's a lot in that plot that is still deep, but hard to dig out because of how rough it is, And somehow that even makes it more intriguing to me.
Yeah, and I think, I just thought about this just now as you were talking about the scene, especially where Aerith dies, or Aerith. Which was the original? Because
Aerith.
It was Aerith okay, so Aerith is the correct one.
Well, Aerith is the one that they want it to be now, but Aerith is the one that everybody who played Final Fantasy VII originally knows her as.
Right.
I mean, whatever. It doesn't. Whatever.
Well, no, but Aerith is correct because Aerith was the only name that was changed in the localization. I just never remember which is which. But anyway, that scene where she dies, and I was just thinking about it as you were talking, Angelo, because Hironobu Sakaguchi, he was really interested in film. And he kind of really wanted to tell a story in his games, and he kind of wanted to be a director, I think, of film even more than video games. He and Kojima might have something in common there. Of course, we know what happened when he actually did direct a film, but I digress. That moment is just directed so well, and really ahead of its time, 'cause we're talking 1997 here, but the fact that, the sword goes through her chest, she drops the materia, and the moment that it drops, the music starts. And it just drops down those stairs. And then you have to fight this boss battle while you're reeling from what you've just seen. I mean, it's such a powerful moment. I mean, I still remember it, and I haven't seen that scene in, a long time.
Well, there's that scene afterwards, too, where I remember Cloud actually is holding her, and he's saying something to him what did you do? She'll never laugh, she'll never cry, don't you realize what you've done? And Sephiroth is just gone. He's completely done mentally, and he's just trying to explain this stuff to an insane person. But I mean, the way he's just that was the one part where it finally kind of clicked a little bit for me, and I started to really react was when he said that particular line, because then it meant something to him, and that was when kind of it started to coalesce that there was some real chemistry between these two characters, because the game did a crappy job of bringing it up until then. But I don't know, it really hurt, you know what I mean? So that was that. But then I went back and I played 6 and 4, like I said, and there were moments. I mean, anybody who doesn't look at the opera scene and go, "Wow, okay, there's something really cool going on here," is missing it.
Oh man, but the thing about that scene, and it's so hard, it makes me sound like an old man, and I'm one of those people who rejects that whole "Oh, I'm over 30, I'm old," but there's something about the opera scene that is hard to convey to someone if you weren't there when it happened, because I was sitting there, cross-legged in front of my TV going, my Super Nintendo is singing to me. What is going on? Because, I mean, it's the Super Nintendo sound chips, and it's not actual voice, but they finagled it in such a way to where it sounds like voice, and it actually even corresponds to the lyrics on the screen.
Yeah.
So your brain actually makes that connection to where you're actually hearing, quote unquote, these characters sing these lines, and I think that's totally lost on somebody if you give it to them now and say, here, look at this amazing scene in Final Fantasy VI, and they're just like, well, that's cute, I guess. It's neat that I had to memorize the dialogue, sort of, but
there's such depth to that too, because it's meta, dude. It's an opera within an opera.
Yeah.
It's a tragic story within another big tragic story, and some of the lines are so good, even with the kind of I think they knew that this scene, that they of course they knew that this scene was big, and they took a little more care maybe translating that, those lines like I'm the darkness, you're the starlight. It's like, wow, okay. They took some care when they did this, even on the Super Nintendo, with making sure they got the right words.
Absolutely.
Whereas other times where the spoony bard stuff happens.
And that line it's in Final Fantasy 11 as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But no, and then even, and going back, oh man, I miss Sakaguchi, guys. Because just thinking, and I'm just thinking about it now, stuff, you talk, Angela, about reading too much into this stuff, but I really think that as an adult going back and looking at this stuff, it's kind of amazing, because that opera scene, the final part where Celis is, at the spire and, her tears are blowing in the wind, is a complete correlation to later on in the World of Ruin, where she if you do things poorly, because you don't necessarily see it in every playthrough if you know what you're doing, but if you do things poorly, and she tries to commit suicide, it's that scene, but in real life. Well, real life in a Final Fantasy game, but...
Right.
Oh, man.
Dark.
So dark.
But, and then there was 9. 9 was all the nostalgia, man. And I can talk about 9 a little bit more as far as that goes when we talk about the music. That game is dripping with musical cues to the original game. It's oozing with them, and it just... I've always been a music guy. I was a music guy from the word go. I mean, Final Fantasy was the game that got me into video game music. So that was the first time I was like, I need to know who did this soundtrack because there's something really special about this. And we're not talking about the original. We're talking about the 8-bit one. But so many callbacks and so much great nostalgia. And then I think they echoed that again in 14. But that's where the nostalgia factor is just through the roof. And it's that emotion. The first time, I'm spoiling stuff, whatever. The first time you go to the...
Yeah, this is a Final Fantasy podcast. You can spoil.
No. I mean, well...
Oh, you mean as far as like our order, yeah.
The first time I went to the... And I'm going to butcher this. It's like Gurguru Volcano. It's an onomatopoeia for gurgling in Japanese. And I heard the same music in the volcano in Final Fantasy IX. I was like, that's amazing! You know, they redid this, and I loved it in the original game. I was like, it's this perky, bubbly, you know, it sounds like a gurgling bit of music. And then they did it again, and I was like, wow, this is great. So, there's so much great, delicious nostalgia.
And we can talk about characters a little bit. We'll move on to Erika, but
oh yeah,
like I fell in love with Final Fantasy IX the moment that Vivi walked onto the screen and tripped.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
dressed in that black mage outfit, dude.
Yeah, and then gets up and like adjusts his hat and like dusts off his coat. I was like, and he became, well, he's definitely my favorite Final Fantasy character, and he's tied with Frog as being my favorite like RPG character of all time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have such similar tastes. I was going to say the same.
I have a soft spot for Terra. I've always felt, gosh, I don't know. Like I can't say I relate to Terra. I can't at all. But her plight is one that's just, I can understand that it's got some real emotional weight behind it. Like when you understand like what she's going through in that game, and that she is all of a sudden this person that she didn't even know she was capable of being. She's just basically torn to shreds by her fate, in other words. And, wow. You know? I mean, people talk about, needing female leads in games, and I don't want to diminish that. I mean, I would like to see more women in games. I honestly would, and I'm not meaning that as a political statement or anything. I just think it'd be cool. But she was amazing, and I wish she was a little better explained in the game. Again, we're dealing with dated mechanics and localization and basically ability. Mm. But there's so much potential in that character, and enough of it bleeds through for me to go, wow, with her, especially in her theme. But anyway, yeah, her theme is really emotional, and really, it is the theme everybody thinks of when they think of Final Fantasy VI. And there's a reason for that. And I think it's a really good one for that character. So, yeah, here's my feels.
It was so weird when I think Square Enix, I think it was before Lightning Returns came out, or maybe it was when Lightning Returns was announced, that they said that they were happy to announce like the first Final Fantasy game with a female protagonist. And it's like, what are you talking about? What about Terra and Yuna and even Lightning the first time around? Because Lightning is kind of the main character of Final Fantasy 13. Yeah. So, don't really know what you're talking about there, Square Enix.
Yeah.
Erika, how about you? Like, you know, some of your fondest memories and characters and what have you?
You know, I think the sense, like, just in general, I think the sense of belonging the series offered me, both within the genre and just in general, just making friends growing up. Like, I didn't really have any of that kind of stuff in common with people in terms of video games, but when I got into the Final Fantasy series, that's what helped unite me to so many people, and unfortunately people I'm not really friends with anymore, but at the time, being like, you know, like a young teen and actually feeling that sense of belonging, it was amazing, you know, so I think it just ramped it up that much more for me. But to also be able to find a video game genre that spoke to me, like something that, you know, years and years later I would still be playing like nonstop and is still considered my favorite genre. Like, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that I was able to start with a series like Final Fantasy, even if it did have its ups and downs, because I who knows where I'd be right now. I might not even be playing JRPGs. I might not even know the extent of like the genre or even be playing it for that matter. I think that some of my favorite moments, and I mean, there's just a little bit trickled here and there throughout several of the games. But I mean, I know 9, one of my favorites, was actually the Chocobo side quest with the pieces, like, the snapshots of different places where you need to dig.
Chocobo Hot and Cold, I loved that.
Yeah, that was like the most fun mini game ever. I spent so much time with that. That game made me want to actually complete as many of the side missions as I could. Mm-hmm. And that was by far the most entertaining one. I had so much fun with it. I remember like getting together with friends and being like, oh, where on the map is this little snapshot taken from? Like, we would have like such discussions over it, right? But even like throughout like cutscenes and things like that too, like the moment where Dagger, or when Garnet kind of takes on the role of Dagger, she takes responsibility for her own fate, and the scene where she cuts her hair, like that was just so groundbreaking for me. And another scene that really got me was just when you learn, or when Vivi learns and has this realization of where he comes from, you know, like that was probably one of the most heartbreaking ones for me, actually. I remember crying to that one. That was really, really good. And the way the music it just infused into these games, you know, not just 9, but in general, it's funny how music can serve, it can be such an impact to a cutscene, or to a particular scene. It doesn't even have to be a cutscene. It's amazing how the two can work together to create such emotional moments. I think another one of my favorites, I do like in 6, I do like the opera scene very much so as well. I'm really glad that you mentioned that, and I'm really glad, Angelo, that you talked about how it is kind of playing off of the story itself, like it's a story within a story. I love that, and I thought it was a very smart decision on their part to be able to do something like that, and to be able to reflect upon the story within another. It's something that I wish we could see more of, and I wish we could see that much thoughtfulness towards the story, and that much, not just regard for the story, but to just not try and blow things out of proportion and look at the small things and what you can do to make those that much better. And I'll go back into that some more later. But also the moment in 6 when, like, the world of ruin, like the fact that we even got to that point, I was just, like, after the Flying Continent, I didn't know what was, like, what's possibly gonna happen. You're at a point in the story where you think it's all over, you know? It's really amazing when you have to piece everything back together and kind of, you know, dust yourself off and get back up and try again, you know? It's amazing. Let's see, what else? I know in Final Fantasy X, one of my favorite scenes was when Yuna was sending off the souls. Like, that was probably, like, one of the most, emotional experiences as well. That game's very good for, in the way that it juxtaposes music with its visuals. I particularly liked that soundtrack, actually, just because I've always been really big into piano collections and things like that. So it's, that send-off scene was really, really emotional, and it just conveyed the magic of a character like her, someone who's so naive yet is still able to establish so much beauty within herself. I think that game was really good for that. And I like seeing these little things, like, little moments for characters that, you know, they might not be like, I mean, they might have initially seemed like the most groundbreaking characters because they're not like some stereotypical strong character, but they show strength through their weaknesses, and that's something I've always admired in characters, and those tend to be my favorite characters, are characters that are so willing to show their weaknesses. I found that to be the strongest thing of all, rather than hiding that kind of stuff or just being an outwardly strong person. Like, there's something really special about having a character that might initially seem weak who has so much inner strength.
Yeah. And kind of playing off that, Erika, like, one of the things that I love about 10 the most is, when you learn that Riku is afraid of lightning. And then, I don't know if everybody noticed this, but anytime that she gets hit with a lightning spell in the game, she whimpers. And it's like, it's such a neat little, like, thing to her character that, you know, they establish it, but then it actually carries through into battle and stuff like that. I just thought that was a really neat touch. But at the same time, like, that's like her one, like, you know, like fear or whatever. I mean, she's definitely a very capable, very strong, very lovable character, but that little extra something, you know, that little flaw is I think what makes her very special.
Yeah, definitely.
There's the piano piece, I think it's called To Xenarkland or something like that? Xenarkand? Is that saying that right? Xenarkand. I'm glad you actually brought that up. You mentioned piano, you mentioned the music, and I was like, that is one of the most simple but probably the most emotional pieces that has come out of this franchise. It's just absolutely beautiful.
Especially because, Angela, I know you haven't played 10 yet, but once you know what's going on in that scene, because it's the first thing that you see in Final Fantasy X.
Right.
But once you have the context for it, it just makes it that much more powerful. Like, it's
cool.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
God, I want to break open that HD collection right now, but I probably won't have time until the weekend.
Yeah.
Favorite characters, Erika? Like,
favorite characters. I have so many favorite characters for so many different reasons. Like, I've talked about on my channel how Yuna and Garnet or Dagger are some of my absolute favorites just because of the inner strength that they exhibit. Despite kind of being like, I don't know, put into a position that they don't necessarily want to be in, but they take responsibility. They take responsibility, and in the best way possible too. But also characters like Vivi, I think just because he has such magic to him. He's so naive, yet so, I don't know. It's really hard to express with him. But there's just something so whimsical about him, and something so true and just so fresh to the series. I always really liked, I actually really liked Terra as well, and I'm really glad that you brought that up too, Angelo, because Terra, she's a very sad character, and I felt like, like there's so many sad characters, like Locke as well, and his relationship, with everybody, and with Rachel, his lost love now. But yeah, no, there's just so many like heartfelt, like unrequited love or lost love or all these things where like you can connect with it, and you could connect with it in some shape or form. And it just, I don't know, it's like all these games are so good at offering that emotional element where even if you can't necessarily relate to the characters, you can understand their emotions to some extent. Man, who else? Yeah, man, there's just so many. There's too many, but yeah, I mean, those are just a few. Those are just a few of my favorite, but it's funny, I can't even really convey what it is. Just like how, even though I say 9 is my favorite, there's something, I mean, 6 is very close behind, but just in general, like, they're so different from each other, and I could say 7 is my favorite for a totally different reason, or 10, or 4, or, well, not 8, or 2. You made good point about 2. But, yeah, like, there's just something so special about all of them, and it all depends on context, and I think that goes for characters as well. Yeah.
I definitely think that Final Fantasy is one of those where, as a fan, like if you've really been with the series, like Angela, you had mentioned like ups and downs, and I think for me, there haven't been downs up until just very recently, and even then, I would say the only down has been like Lightning Returns. But that being said, like I feel that like for me, I can be like, oh wow, like this is the best game ever because of this, but then I go back and play 9, it's like, oh, this is the best game ever because of that, and then, just thinking about it, it's like, oh, wait, this is the best game ever because it's got this and this. I'd forgotten about that until I just started thinking about it. Like, it's definitely one of those storied franchises that, and that's the reason that we're doing this, and I think the reason that it works, and also the reason that people get so upset at Square Enix lately and stuff is just because they are so passionate about the series, and, you feel so personally invested in it that if things start to go a way that you don't want the series to go, you almost feel personally offended at it. And we'll definitely get into that.
Yeah, I definitely feel like there's an overarching like theme of like one big emotion of like love toward the whole Final Fantasies for me, but I didn't really feel the down so much as you, Julian, because I just stuck to the mainline franchise. I didn't go with like the 10-2 or the 13-2 yet, at least. I don't know if I want to succumb to that, but.
Oh, well, and to be fair, and I know, Patrick, you also really enjoyed 13, but I mean, I love Final Fantasy X-2, and I liked Final Fantasy 13-2 more than 13. It's really just been more that I hate Lightning Returns. And if you missed the last episode, you can hear me tear that game a new one for about 45 minutes. I will say no more unless, like I said, if I turn a corner and find out that the game gets better later on, then I will mea culpa. But man, yeah.
For Final Fantasy though, I sort of got like my first idea of like a metaverse in some ways because none of the stories are the same from entry to entry, and it shows how like all of the fantasy stories though can have major similarities even though they're not in the same world or they take completely different names. But even though they're like futuristic or medieval or like a comedy or a drama, all of them come of age and have themes and obstacles for young people to overcome. And there's like always the end of the world happening or the corruption at the top of the organization that happens, and or like just like the top of the religion or something like Bartanalis or whatever it may be. But all of the Cactars and the Moogles of the world like show that even though the stories are separate, they're all like contained in this one metaverse, and I was just like never able to think on as high a level before.
Yeah, it's like, is there a Cid? Is there a Moogle? Is there a Chocobo that I can ride? Like these are things that like span the series to the point that, when Final Fantasy 12 came out and they kind of did away with the traditional summons, it made me a little sad because while you do have stuff like Bahamut and Ifrit come in the form of like airships, like, the actual pantheon of characters to summon are completely different. And I was like, aw, like.
I had wondered if there was some sort of a backstory going on with like them in the background somehow overseeing, the potential end of all these worlds, and they would just show up in a new world. And that was, that was like the Final Fantasy was these people going to oversee the final, what could potentially be the end of these worlds. And then, okay, we resolved that one, let's go on to the next one. But I don't know.
Ooh, I like that.
There could be a future one that's like the Final Fantasy.
There might be.
I kind of feel like that's going to be 15, but I hope not.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. That dragon, like when the person's running out, looks so cool. I think there's no way this one's going to go wrong. I'm happy about it.
I'm more concerned that it's just not going to be successful enough for them, and it's going to be the final nail in the coffin. Because honestly, 14 vanilla almost put Square Enix out of business. And I guess A Realm Reborn has been doing well, so hopefully that will make up for it. But I mean, they hemorrhaged money.
I heard they went back in the black with A Realm Reborn. They made money last year.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. But there's always like a big moment for me in a Final Fantasy, and I think like going back to what we were each talking about my favorite moments that I could think of over the past week were seeing Midgar for the first time. Like, when I finally got out of that city, I was like, there's more. There's a lot.
Yeah. That was a big one.
It feels so different, too, because you've been in this, like, ugly, dank environment for so long. I mean, it takes a long time to open up, out of Midgar and see the world, and it's like, oh, there is grass. There are hills. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, that was just like, I could see, like, the horizon of the landscape better than ever before, and the whole world just kind of, like, opens up to you there. And I never felt that way in real life even. Like, that's just such a great escape to be able to journey wherever you want and get your own airship and stuff. Yeah. I gotta say, guys, Vivi is definitely the best. I've been, like, reading all about him as we've been talking about him. That's why I was a little silent until now, but, like, there's something about him that just separates himself from the rest of the characters, because he's a black mage, but he's AI, like artificial intelligence made by the queen, in Alexandria. And he's like, got all these kids, even though he's AI, because he was the prototype. Everyone after him looks up to him like he's the father, even though he's only like 9 years old. And he, like, you see him grow, but not physically. You see him grow through the entire Final Fantasy emotionally, and, like, learn about death and all of these weightier issues, and, like, see them through the eyes of a child again, sort of like I felt at the time. And I don't know, in some ways I identified with him that way, but there's just so much about him, like his trances, even, like, down to his spells. I really love him, because you could cast double magic, and he's the only person who can cast black magic in the game. But then when he turns into when he goes trance, he turns into, like, a white mage, and, like, his hat fits well and everything, and he's just, like, the embodiment of light, and his name even, like, means life. It's just like, if there was only one character, I would choose to clone him.
I also love the fact that if you put him with Steiner, like, he had a completely new ability that was only available with Steiner, where he could, cast magic on Steiner's weapons. Like, I thought that was a really cool touch.
That was cool.
Because basically, for me, Final Fantasy IX is only about Zidane, Dagger, Vivi, and Steiner. The rest of the cast doesn't exist.
You kind of forget about them, though. You're right.
They just work so well. I mean, but to be fair, like, for me, Final Fantasy VII is also about Cloud, Barret, and Tifa. Like, to me, that's the cast of Final Fantasy VII. Mm-hmm. Sorry, Aerith, but...
Well, actually, one of my favorite characters is Red 13. Mm-hmm. Do you guys know the backstory of Red 13 or remember? Because he was, like, orphaned at a young age, and no one ever knows what he is. It's just so mysterious.
Oh, but that was a pretty sad thing. Do you remember that? The whole...
No, I don't totally remember that.
I think Patrick's going to get to it, so I'm going to let him talk.
Yeah, well, his mother died, I think, at birth, or, like, when he was really young, and, like, when he was 2 or 3, I think his dad dies, if I remember correctly, and then, like, the grandfather of the village, well, he calls him grandfather, but he's not really grandfather, has to take care of him, and so he never really is known, like, well, he's known, like, this pack and this clan of God knows what, because they never really say what he is. Like, they say he's a lion, but he moves like a dog, people say. And, like, before Advent Children, they also say he sounds like a lion, but, like, they never explicitly say what species he is. And, like, so, like, he's this wanderer who can never have an identity of his own. And I think that there's something just, basically dramatic about it at the most basic level. It's just like...
And also, because that's the part that I got to before the Square Enix version of Final Fantasy VII on PC lost my save. Thank you, Cloud Saves. Like, so I remember that more vividly just because I've seen that most recently, but also the fact that he kind of grows up thinking that his father was a coward.
Yes.
And then learns that no, his father actually sacrificed himself to save the village, from attackers, and, was turned to stone and, is, like, impaled with all these spears, and, that's definitely, like, a very powerful thing. And
yeah, there's that scene where him when he finally realizes it, he runs up to the cliffside with his father's statue there, well, it's his father turned to stone, he just starts howling.
Yeah, and then the statue cries, which,
Yeah. He's supposed to be this warrior the whole time, but he's always been so humble and doesn't feel like he's like so strong. But then he finds out that his dad is strong and was and sacrificed, ultimately his whole life. So I think it's a great culmination of his character.
I just didn't really use him because I didn't really care for his character design, but we can get into that later. Nomura. I do like Red 13 Part 2, which is Kamari, where he just made him stand on two legs and turned him blue. It's basically the same character.
Okay.
That's what Nomura does. He has 7 templates and then he just reuses them ad nauseum.
Move the zippers around. New character.
Yeah.
I'm curious, guys, if we constrained our argument to just the main characters, who would you pick as your favorite main character? I was thinking about it. I don't know.
Like actual hero of the
clouds, wall, lightning. I don't know.
Oh man.
Fighter.
Oh hush.
I'm kidding.
It's got to be Cecil for me. I know that's the obvious answer because I love Final Fantasy IV so much, but one, I miss the games where they would have older protagonists because you get the impression that Cecil is probably in his late 20s to early 30s. And of course you have characters like Yang and Tella who are older, but the fact that he begins his journey as this Dark Knight and the, pawn of the king and does some very terrible things in the name of the king. And then, the rest of the game is his quest for redemption, leading, culminating with him becoming a paladin, which is the, antithesis of the Dark Knight. I think that's just a very amazing journey. And, I really feel that he's the epitome of, the heroic knight. But also the fact that he's the heroic knight, of light that comes from the darkness. I've experienced that story so many times that it's never gotten old. Boom.
I think mine probably boom. I think mine would probably be Zidane because he comes off like a total how would a skirt chaser. That's probably the best way. He's kind of he's not a womanizer, but he's clearly clearly a skirt chaser, but he has so many insecurities about his past and everything too. And he's a genuinely kind-hearted character, despite all, I love how humorous he is. I like how he's so unlike, in a way, what you would expect from a protagonist, like it. Because he's so comical. But he has some real inner strength in him too. And he's really great. I don't know. There's something about him. It was very refreshing when I first started playing 9 and I realized that he was going to be the main character,
Yep. I agree. I found him to be delightfully roguish. But,
he's the epitome of the thief with a heart of gold.
I wanted a thief lead character in that game so bad too. I was just like, oh, my lead character's a thief. This is the best thing ever. And I don't know why, but maybe.
Locke was pretty. He wasn't the main character, but he was pretty damn near close.
Yeah,
I like Locke a lot too.
I love Locke. Yeah.
But I'm gonna stick with Terra.
That's a really good one. Yeah.
I love Zidane, but I think Lightning's my favorite because of her deadpan humor and I don't know. Overall demeanor. I know you guys hate her for not expressing her emotions and stuff. I love that. I don't know.
No, I loved Lightning in Final Fantasy 13. I hate what they did to her in Lightning Returns.
Right. Yeah,
I think one of my favorite parts of Final Fantasy 13 is when Snow is whining about their predicament and stuff, and she just punches him in the face.
Uh-huh.
It's such a great scene.
Yeah. I just found it kind of ironic that a lot of or almost all the characters are male, except for two main protagonists, and my favorite one's a female.
I mean, Final Fantasy X was kind of billed as having dual protagonists, so you could definitely count Yuna in there.
Can you? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because she, and even again going to 6, I mean, really, it's kind of hard to say like main character in a ensemble cast, which all the games have. Yeah, you could definitely say that like Final Fantasy VI has dual protagonists with Terra and Locke. So I'd almost say that, the series has had, a pretty good share of female protagonists, even if they're not like, definitely Lightning is the one on the front of the box. So she kind of gets bigger billing. But Yuna, well, I guess she was on the back of the box.
13-2 though, she was for the main.
Well, no, she wasn't.
Or not 13-2, 10-2.
Yeah, she definitely was. And that's kind of how they build it too, was, her saying this is my story because, Tidus was like, listen to our story in the other game.
Yeah. Also with 6, you can't really count out Celeste. I know she isn't really a lead.
Right.
But, I also really, and I forgot to mention this, I also really liked, Edgar and Sabin. Mostly because they reminded me of me and my own brother. So, I got into that a little bit once in a bonus episode I did. Or no, I did it in that podcast we used to do, the music one, Digital Mystery Tour. But, the thing is, it's just kind of like, it really is kind of like, you take out the whole kingdom drama. And, I'm kind of like the nerdy older brother who's into gadgets and gizmos. And my brother's like the guy who, they're really nice guy, likes to work out, kind of into that sort of thing, and he has the same sense of humor. It was just really neat to see that in a game, and I kind of realized it after playing the game, like definitely later on in life, I was like, oh my gosh, that's cool. That there's so much like us. So that was kind of neat to see too.
Does your brother also like dash forward with a flurry of punches when he presses forward, back, forward, A?
No, but I have seen him suplex a train.
Awesome.
No.
Yeah, I guess I haven't really talked about my moments. And there's a ton that I could talk about from the series. Everything from, Palom and Porom sacrificing themselves in Final Fantasy IV, to, we've already mentioned, like, the opera scene and the breaking of the world in 6 a couple times. Or, the really awesome beginning of Final Fantasy IX where you're kind of performing, for the queen, in disguise and stuff like that. And I'll come out right out and say it. I love the laughing scene of Final Fantasy X. I know that that's the scene that everybody always makes fun of for the voice acting, but it comes to the core of those characters so well. The fact that Yuna is so reserved and timid, and Tidus is the boisterous, extrovert who's trying to get her to enjoy living a little bit. It's just a great scene. But I'm not going to really highlight any of those because I kind of want to give Final Fantasy XI a little bit of love because Angela, I know you played it, but I've played it a lot more, and I have so many of my favorite all-time video game memories, period, come from playing Final Fantasy XI for as many years as I have. Everything from that first, like, whirlwind week, 'cause I actually took like 4 days off when that game came out.
Wow.
Because I knew that I wanted to really absorb into it, and, rolling with, 'cause I played as a Taru, which are the little guys, and rolling with an all Taru Link shell, like at the beginning of the game, and, just that feeling of like having 6 or 7 of those little guys running into like a really tough area, and everybody making fun of us because when the game started, the Taru weren't supposed to be like fighters or anything. They were only supposed to be casters, but I was a monk and my friend Masupa was a red mage with a sword, and we had another friend who was a warrior, and it's like, but we were all 2 feet tall. And just getting to know these people from all over the world, and,
so great.
I remember like that, like logging off of the game at like 10 p.m. or something, and then logging back into the game at like 3 a.m. and still having friends on and being like, oh, you couldn't sleep either? It's like, nah, I just kind of wanted to get back in here. All of that stuff to, later on when I got my best friend Shanna playing the game with me and I rolled a new character, and teaching her how to play the game to the point where, 'cause she had never played anything like it. And I literally trained her. I was like, this is how you do this. This is how you do that. When you're playing this role, this is what you need to do in a battle situation. And watching her go from like a complete and utter noob to being one of the best paladins, on our server, just bar none. Also a pretty damn good white mage and a good dancer and a bunch of other jobs that she's taken to the highest levels since. So that was very special. And also, and I mentioned this, if you want to go back and listen to our, Love and the MMORPG special where we were talking about Final Fantasy 11 and 14, meeting someone like, our friend Ethicant, who actually was an older man who passed away, and we had a memorial for him in the game. But having so many wonderful talks with that man, in the wee hours of the morning, because he'd be on at all different times because he was ill and he wasn't working, and, talking about everything from, the potential legalization of weed to the depth of the lyrics of War Pigs by Ozzy Osbourne, to the fact that he was like one of the biggest, dirty old men I've ever met, and I learned so much from him about innuendo and flirting and stuff like that. And that's another thing is, our Link Shell After Dark conversations, because we had so many bawdy ladies in our Link Shell that, things would just get dirty, and we finally had to enact a rule that we had to wait until after 10 p.m., Eastern time before that, conversation could start, because we basically give a warning to all of the minors in the group. Okay, it's Link Shell After Dark. And then just letting all of the flirting and dirty talk fly, and going up to Horlias Peak to go into the hot tub there and stuff like that. It's not actually a hot tub, it's like a hot spring. But, just great times, and, I miss it, and I feel that it's really lightning in the bottle that you can't get back. Like, Patrick, I know you're about to experience, Final Fantasy 14, and I'm really curious if you'll get what I got out of Final Fantasy 11, because I really feel that it was that time and it was that place, and I don't know if that's ever going to happen again. But, man,
we'll make it that way. We'll see. You'll be there too, so we'll try to make it that way.
We'll see, yeah. I mean, I just feel that MMOs have gone away from the social aspect and have gone more towards you can play it by yourself if you wanna. You can do everything by yourself if you wanna. And so a lot of people do, and I think that kind of defeats the purpose of the MMO, but...
Well, 14 has 20-man and 40-man raids at the end of the game at least, so I'm excited about that.
Right, but 11 was a game where you had to start making friends as early as level 10, because you just literally could not progress without a full party after that point. It's different now. You can definitely play longer before you need to group up, but man, those early days, and that game was so tough, and ridiculously tough, but it was that thing where it was a crucible that kind of forced everybody into these friendships, because you had to rely on each other to survive. And those alliances, became really special, and I have all these fond memories of people, and it's sad that I'm not in touch with them anymore, and that I don't play. I still have my membership going, I pay for it every month. I should really get back in there, but, I barely have time to play my one-player games these days. But yeah, I just really wanted to give a shout out to those moments. But yeah, character-wise, obviously I said, Cecil is one of my all-time favorites. Vivi, of course. I would like to also give some shout out to Tidus, because I mentioned this to y'all before the show, but I just love the fact that he's this dumb jock that is in way over his head, and is such a different character from the Clouds and Squalls of the world. And I think that's part of the reason there was so much backlash for that game when it came out. But really, he is one of the most charming main characters in a game, period. And also have to give, really big props to, Auron, who's just, the most grizzled badass,
oh my God.
Just bar none. Just love that guy. If you haven't been able to tell, listeners, I'm really excited to play Final Fantasy X again. I haven't played it in 10 years. So, yeah.
Speaking of meta stuff, just real quick, there was, for a while there, I was, I don't know how I even stumbled into it. I knew I was just really into Final Fantasy after Final Fantasy VII came out. And I stumbled across the message board on the internet, and I was just involved with those people for pretty much the entire span of the PlayStation era of Final Fantasy games and into 10. And I just, at some point it all just sort of fell apart. There was one thing after another that just sort of led to it dissolving. But for years and years and years, it wasn't an MMO like you were saying, but I got to know these people just through loving this franchise. And it was really cool because, you talk about the games a lot, and you talk about video games a lot by proxy, and but you also talk about, your own stuff and each other, and this game this franchise, I feel like more than any other, has the ability to foster, just unique relationships with people, especially like in the MMO environment, but even outside of it. It's funny because it was Final Fantasy 13, but outside of one of the last midnight launches I went to was the launch for Final Fantasy 13. And I was there waiting in line, and when I was in line for other launches, like I went to the launch for, the Halo games and everything, you kind of talked to your friends, and that was more or less about it. And like nobody was there. But this was like a dozen people, and we were all just talking to each other, and we were talking about the other games and our favorite moments in the other games. And like some guy, like right before they opened the gates, like actually gave a speech, and we applauded, and it was the nerdiest but most fun thing ever. And then I played Final Fantasy 13. But anyway, it's just, I don't know why, but there's something about this one that I just think is unique and special, and just has so much power behind it that I don't know. I don't know what else to say about it other than that you had those kind of experiences with this franchise. Doesn't really surprise me because it's powerful in that way, I think.
Oh, absolutely. I wish that, like, when I was growing up and stuff, cause like Erika, you definitely have a different experience, cause you're, almost 10 years younger than me, but like, I wish that there had been more outlets for me to interact with people who were into this stuff, when I was experiencing it as it was happening. I wasn't really on the internet as much, as some people, like Angela, you had your best boards and stuff. I didn't really get into that until like right around like 2004 or so. But, I would have loved to have been able to like go to conventions and stuff and be talking to people who were like, hey, that dude's dressed as Sephiroth. Or, that girl is like really into this. Cause like, that was the thing, is that like that, I feel like I'm like about 5 years too old to have been in school when this stuff was okay, to like talk about, like, or to be around, like, I would have had a completely different like set of friends and experience growing up if I had just been born like a few years later, because I feel like everything just like became like widely accepted, in the geek realm. And it was like, oh yeah, like it's totally cool to be passionate about this stuff. And you know what? A bunch of girls are too. And you have something in common, which, I did not when I was in school. So yeah, so I definitely did connect with people over 11, because that was also my first foray into, communicating with people outside of like my, general area. And that was amazing. Like having friends in England and Canada and, Spain and stuff like that was just amazing. So yeah, we've talked a lot about our love of this franchise and what it means to us, but it's fair to say that the series is not what it once was. Again, Patrick and I did enjoy Final Fantasy 13. I would say that if I was rating it on like the PixlBit scale, 13 is probably the only game in the series, besides 2, that I would give, below a, 4.5 star rating. I would probably rate it at 3 stars, which is, it is what it is, because as much as I love the characters, and I do love the characters in that game, and as much as I love to look at it, and as much as I love that battle system, I think you can't deny that it's missing a lot of the stuff that, for me, made Final Fantasy special. Yeah. And I kind of was just wondering, I think it's different for everybody, but, the series has started to, like the crystal has basically started to shed its light, basically, and I just wonder, when it started shedding its light for everybody and why, and maybe we can also kind of bring our heads together and try to figure out what we could do to bring it back. Erica, would you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, actually, I think this is a good time. I think it's one of those things where, it's almost like I almost get the impression that they don't want to go back in the way that we want them to. Like, we're looking for this nostalgia, right? But they're looking at things in such a different manner. And it's funny how they're so dead set on just making things just bigger and better and keep topping themselves, without, I feel like they no longer have as much regard for the little things that made the series so great. And I feel like all they're focusing on, like I said, is just topping themselves, is trying to make things, even more extravagant. I think that, yeah, they do offer nods back, every now and again, but it's not always like theater rhythm. I think, is that what it was called?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I liked how they did that. I thought that was actually really nice, but to actually have a full release, I feel like a full game release, I feel like they don't feel the need to go back to that. They can establish something totally new and, I guess, in a way alien to anything else we'd experienced in the past. Which is weird because, you think that for a company like that, they would realize how much nostalgia fuels the popularity of the series, right? But, for some reason they think otherwise. I don't know. That's just what I'm getting out of it.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you brought that up, right off the bat, Erica, because I wanted to kind of talk about this talk that, some people at Square Enix had made. This is actually a couple of years ago. This was after the E3 Agnes Philosophy tech demo came out, which was supposed to be the first look at Square Enix's next gen engine. And I don't know if you guys remember, this is the one where it's set kind of in a Middle Eastern setting. Mm-hmm. There's guys with AK-47s. It doesn't really feel very Final Fantasy-ish, other than the fact that it looks like something that the artist from Final Fantasy would come up with.
The potion thing.
Right. And also just the way that the character herself, she looks like a Final Fantasy character.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was interesting that they basically were talking about the core tenets of what they believe, and they being the people who are working on the series now, which, Angela, you've brought up a good point in the past, that are the people that made the games that we loved in the past. And some of them definitely are, but some of them aren't. But they had this list of these are the pillars of Final Fantasy. The first one is magic. The second one is summoning. The third one is gorgeous beauty. Which, Erica, that's right to your point. I think that, since Final Fantasy VII, it was almost like they had been a little indie movie studio, and then all of a sudden they got a big budget. And from that point on, it was just we need to top ourselves. We need to do better. We need to do bigger. Because that's what we are now. We're this big spectacle company where we used to be more about these smaller, more personal journeys. And they also have in there refinement, which is whatever that is, and also change and challenge. But I find it interesting that none of those core tenets really speak to character design or story or game mechanics. I definitely get the sense that their feelings on what the franchise needs to be moving forward is very different than what we think it should be as fans.
Yeah, it's such a shame because it's I mean, they're this giant company that, like, their standards are so different at this point that and I don't want to be pessimistic about this, but I don't see them actually, like, believing that, like, they can just go back. Like, I feel like all they want to do is just continue pushing forward with new and better things without thinking, like, of how groundbreaking some of the past stuff was too, and what you can take from those things, right? So, yeah, I don't know. And I mean, also with the way that, like, when they release a game now, they have such high standards in terms of the amount they make from these games, right? I think that what they're thinking is, like, if they release something that's any less of what, like, 13 is or 15 is or something, that they're going to be losing a lot of money. I almost feel like they're thinking of that so much, like, in a financial perspective, that they'll just lose money. But I don't know. I mean, that's just the impression I'm getting, because they're very, like, I don't know, like, it's a very money-driven company at this point. And I mean, of course you want to make a profit. Of course you want to make something successful, something that you can localize as well, too, right, to the world. But I feel like it's very money-driven in the past years.
Almost to the point where their expectations are, well, no, I mean, not almost. I mean, their expectations are far beyond what they should be considering the genre. I mean,
yeah.
They are trying to hit, you know, these near, like, not necessarily Call of Duty numbers, but maybe like Assassin's Creed numbers or something with these games where they're putting all this extra time and effort into making these games, like, look gorgeous. But I don't think they're hitting a larger audience than they would have if they had maybe scaled things back a bit. I mean, there is no way that Final Fantasy 15 recoups its, you know, development time, its development costs. There's just no way. And, you know, but I find it also interesting, like, you know, in a post-mortem interview, this is back with One Up, like, and Jeremy Parrish, like, for how old it was, but, Yoshinori Kitase was talking about his goal with Final Fantasy 13, and how he was looking at influences like Call of Duty for the design of the game, because when he was making it, he didn't want to make a role-playing game. And so that's why you have things like a very funneled corridor experience, and you have regenerating health after every battle, because those are kind of things that have come in this most recent generation. And this isn't just Square Enix, I feel like a lot of long-standing companies have started to get away from what made some of their games unique and interesting in the pursuit of trying to win over that mythical, you know, casual player that is going to suddenly be interested in their game, you know, just on a whim, where that doesn't really happen. You know, I think those type of people, they're either the ones who are only playing, like, you know, one or two big games every year, but they play them all year long, you know, like your Call of Duty players and your Madden players, or they're playing things in the mobile sense and they don't really care about playing anything deeper than that. So I almost feel like it's complete folly to try to, you know, put all this effort into winning over people that just aren't there. And then you just need to like kind of lower your expectations and kind of play to your base. You know,
I think the other problem is the fact that JRPGs are still very much considered, they're kind of like a niche genre in their own way. Like, I still find it to be niche, like, but I almost feel like Square Enix is trying to make it mainstream, even though I feel like it's just always going to be niche, in a way. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but, like, I consider it niche in a way. Yeah. And I just feel like, they're just trying too hard to make it something else rather than just work with that, because there are a lot of really amazing JRPGs that come out. Like, I'm thinking like the Persona series, for instance, in the Shin Megami Tensei series, and how they're very niche, yet they're such likable games now, especially since Persona 3 came out, right? Like, they know how to cater to their audience, and I feel like Square Enix is a little bit lost in terms of how to reconnect with their old audience.
They also know enough to know that the AAA space isn't for them. You know,
I don't think they do.
No, I'm talking about Persona. And
yeah.
Those, I'm not talking about, no, Square Enix, quite the contrary. They are really, man, like you were saying with that Call of Duty thing, but it's almost like they try to take Call of Duty and inject it with Final Fantasy magic, and I don't mean magic in the sense of spellcasting. I mean, like, if you look at the system for 13, there's a job system in it. There is a job system in it. You train people in certain jobs, and you switch their jobs on the fly, and they perform those roles in battle. I don't think it's a very good one, but I think they're like, okay, the job system is a really good Final Fantasy thing, and people liked that. So why don't we Call of Duty that and make that role so that it's. I don't think they're trying to combine two worlds that are diametrically opposed to each other. Like, there's the quiet, thoughtful, and I'm stereotyping here, and I apologize, but there's almost like the quiet, thoughtful gamer who is more inclined to play JRPGs and turn-based games and slower-paced games versus the run screaming down a tunnel shooting everything in sight gamer who plays like the Call of Duty games, and they're not going to meet because of a job system. You know, I mean, that's just, I don't know what they're doing, and I don't know how to fix it.
I think it's like a double-edged sword with all Final Fantasy games because each one is supposed to be final and different from the other ones, and I think some of the time it doesn't go so well for each of us. Like, I didn't like Blitzball. You don't like the job system in this one. I didn't mind it. I like how you got to switch quickly and it was fast, but like they have to distinguish themselves from each title so much because they're not supposed to be an overarching theme, whereas like other games like Shin Megami Tensei and other long-running franchises can sort of go with the same tropes over and over again and like refine them and make them more polished and better for their fan base. But this one, like Final Fantasy, doesn't conform to its own mold in some ways, I think.
Right, and like you said, you're not gonna nail it every time, and I'm not going to take it away from them that they're trying to be creative with it and they're trying to innovate and they're trying to be new and trying to be different. I just don't know. I feel like they don't know what makes a good. Well, obviously, I mean, we saw the thing about what they said makes a Final Fantasy game. Like, I don't think they know what makes a good Final Fantasy game, and I even feel funny saying it like that because that sounds pretty judgmental. But it's almost like they want to grab what made the other games special, but they don't know what to pull. I think that's more or less what I mean to say. I mean, a Final Fantasy game is, at the end of the day, whatever Square Enix declares a Final Fantasy game is because they hold that card. But,
sometimes I think that they're just like, oh, we can add a couple new things in, it's gonna be great because it's Final Fantasy.
Maybe they're riding on that license a little bit too much.
I mean, but, I think they definitely did dilute the power of the name of the franchise with a lot of the offshoots and stuff like that. I mean, a lot of companies have done that with different things, but I think it definitely got to the point where having Final Fantasy on the name of something didn't necessarily indicate greatness how it used to. And like going back to like looking back at Final Fantasy 13, knowing what Katase was going for, you could almost kind of respect it because I think that he succeeded in what he was trying to do. Because I actually do really enjoy the battle system for 13. I like the fact that you have to make these snap decisions like very quickly, and there are bosses that will annihilate you if you aren't quick on the draw. But I think that also alienates some of your core role-playing fans. And I really feel that the way to like move that forward and to like the best of both worlds has already been done in the series, and I don't want to talk about it too much, but Final Fantasy X-2's battle system is extremely fast-paced, but it's still strategic and it's still menu-driven, but it's so quick that you can actually combo between your three characters if you're timing your menu decisions just so. And I think that, like, I'm surprised that they never tried to go back to that because I think it's the ultimate evolution of that active time battle system, and I don't know. I think that they've been sitting on the future of the series and just can't see it. And I think that's true for a lot of the stuff is that they, like you said, Angelo, there's all these great things that they could pull from And it's like they've forgotten about them. Like they don't know their own history anymore.
Well, they don't know what's good about their history. I mean, they know enough to release Final Fantasy VI on an iPhone, but they don't know what made Final Fantasy VI so special.
Yeah, because that game definitely doesn't look very good. Like,
Yeah.
I don't like that new art style. But yeah, and actually, I really hope that Bravely Default exceeds their sales expectations, because hopefully that will make them think, you know what, we can put some depth into the Final Fantasy franchise still. Like, people like this, people want this. I mean, I think that while companies like Square Enix and BioWare have gotten away from the core RPG mechanics that built them, other companies have been proving that, no, you know what? People like this stuff, and they like the idea of leveling up and deciding how their characters grow and equipping different items and different weapons and armor. I mean, look at how popular Skyrim was. I mean, that thing sold way more than, games of that type usually do. And also like World of Warcraft is a perfect example of like, that's actually a very deep game, but it's a game that captured grandmothers and, little boys and middle-aged salarymen and everything else, in between.
Skyrim had like one of the biggest campaigns, I think, marketing campaigns I've ever seen. They had huge posters all up in Chicago and stuff, and that does not ever happen with video games, but I love leveling up so much that I like really wish it was in real life.
Yeah.
I know.
It makes things so much easier. I could be able to tell how good I am at stuff.
I mean, I just hit level 34 like a week ago.
Yeah. I've been writing so much, my ability to write went up a level. Like, man, that would be cool.
But, I mean, going back to a point that you made, Erika, like, I feel that, I mean, JRPGs are definitely niche, but there definitely was a time when they were mainstream as much as video games were mainstream. I mean, obviously, video games were still a niche of themselves, but I definitely feel that, like, Final Fantasy VII, right up until about maybe Final Fantasy X, like, that time period, like 97 to about, 2001, JRPGs were like, the hot genre. And, Square Enix was definitely at the top of the heap with that stuff. And so maybe part of the problem is that they still see the RPG as that, like they think of those successes and stuff where, I mean, cause, and again, I have the experience of retail, but there were people who came in buying Final Fantasy VII that you would never expect to buy Final Fantasy VII. And part of that was Sony's marketing campaign, and part of that was just how good the game looked and everything, but it did reach out to people that you wouldn't expect to play role-playing games. But I just don't know if that can be done again. At least not the way they're going.
There's also a certain, this is going to sound weird, it's not fashionable to play JRPGs right now. Like, it is literally not trendy. It is not uncommon for somebody to say, oh, that's a JRPG? That kind of thing. Like, you hear that. You see that out there.
Yeah.
And part of that might be, I would say part of that might be just people who are, that now that there are so many people in there that, in there playing video games that weren't in there before, like I mentioned, your typical Call of Duty player is not going to be interested in JRPGs and is probably going to think that they are garbage. But,
a lot of people in the media, though, like gaming.
That's what I was going to say next. They are just as bad about pushing that out there that, yeah, JRPGs are trash. Forget the fact that I was addicted to them for like 10 years, I don't get why it's cool to hate on them right now, but that's like a trend, I guess. And
the only thing that I could say to possibly, because I like to look at things from different perspectives, the only reason that I could see that that's a thing is because a lot of people in games journalism are all around the same age. They're all in their like early 30s. Well, most of them. So they were around for all of this stuff, and they played a ton of JRPGs, just like I did. And then, just like I did, stuff like Mass Effect came out, and stuff like Oblivion, where it was like, oh, there's this whole other type of role-playing game that I never even knew about, because maybe they didn't play PC games. I didn't, or maybe they did play PC games, and so they just started to gravitate towards that. And so it became cool to be like, oh, you know what? I actually prefer the whole tech tree, conversation tree, make my own character from scratch type of game, as opposed to the very guided, very focused JRPG, because JRPGs are, very, by and large, they're there to tell a very specific story, and you are along for that ride. Now, I would say that I definitely went in that direction, but now I'm at that point where, now that, BioWare has kind of like lost the plot when it comes to what I liked about those games, and I've never been a big Bethesda fan, that I am gravitating back towards the JRPG, so, I'm chomping at the bit to play my Bravely Default and my Final Fantasy X HD. Not so much my Lightning Returns, but, I'm also wanting to kind of branch out and play some of those games that I've missed, because there definitely was a period there where I just wasn't getting excited about JRPGs and I wasn't buying them. Yeah. So I would like to go back and play like Persona. I haven't played those games, so I would love to. I'll probably just wait for Persona 5. But
I also think I'm a bit weird because I prefer a linear story, just generally. I mean, I like reading books, so maybe that's why. It's just I like something that moves from left to right. You know what I mean? It just progresses without too much room for me to mess things up or miss out on stuff.
Yeah, well, speaking of literature, it's kind of like this for me. Like, JRPGs are closest to literature, and the other kinds of RPGs are more like the choose-your-own-adventure books.
Oh, that's a really good analogy.
And I never liked choose-your-own-adventure books. I didn't.
Yeah.
Sorry.
These are like the best forms of choose-your-own-adventure books. I actually kind of like those kind of RPGs, but in the end, I think I'd always stick with the JRPG if I had a choice.
Yeah. It's really funny because, like, I think I actually like the choose your own adventure books or the text adventures more than I do the actual, like, giant RPGs that are out now. Yeah, it's funny how, like, I prefer my imagination over actually having this overwhelming place to explore. So, it's funny with JRPGs actually, because for a long time working as a gaming blogger, I wasn't really, being a journalist, nobody cares about you if you want your niche to be JRPGs. You have to be, with a very specific kind of outlet for it, right? Editors I've worked with, they just did not want that kind of content, right? So I think that's also primarily why I'm really happy that I switched more to vlogging and doing my YouTube channel, because it's become a lot easier to find to find my voice in it, in a place that's extremely welcoming towards it too. It might not be as professional of an outlet as, let's say, a blog or, some big gaming outlet or something would be, but it's still, it's something for me, and I can mold it however I want to, right? And through it all, I've actually met a lot of entertainers who are really big into this kind of stuff and really big into niches and trying to bring it out into the limelight. And I guess that's kind of what I'm trying to do too right now as well with my channel. Yeah.
I definitely think that it definitely still has its audience, and I'm kind of surprised to hear that about editors that you've worked with, because I feel that, when I've talked to people that run websites and stuff, it's hard to find somebody who is willing to review a JRPG just because of that time commitment, but also having that passion for it. And they'll, it's like, well, I've got this review code or I've got this review copy. I don't know what to do with this. I'm surprised that there aren't more people actively looking for that, because my Final Fantasy Retrospective is one of the most highly trafficked things that PixlBit has put out in the last year. Just straight up. I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I'm just saying that, there's still a really huge audience for this stuff. I mean, I fully expect this episode of Nerds Without Pants to be one of our most popular. I mean, one, because you're here, Erika, and you always bring, more clicks. But also, just the subject matter is going to, I fully expect to have far more comments on this episode than anything we've done in the last 2 or 3 months, just because of it being Final Fantasy and people being so passionate about it still.
The biddies better not disappoint you,
right? mean, how do we fix it? Like, but do we fix it? Like, do we have to just admit the fact that, like, they are still targeting, you know, the next generation of Final Fantasy fans and don't really care about the people that came before? Because that's really what Nintendo's MO is. They don't, you know, they're not really interested in catering to, you know, the 20 and 30 somethings who grew up playing their games, because there's a whole new crop of kids who have never played Pokemon before and who have never played Mario before, you know, and that's what they're going for. And I think Square Enix is kind of, you know, in the same boat where, you know, as much of a big legacy as they have and the nods that they will put into the series, you know, for the older players, that's really not who they're looking to cater to. But, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you guys have ideas on how you feel that things should go, and maybe there's a happy medium somewhere.
You know, it's funny. I feel like I broke up with the company. Yeah, you know, it's funny because I'm in this really weird position where it's like, I'm very excited for 10.10.2, HD remaster, but the magic, has kind of disappeared to an extent, and I'm not nearly as excited as I should be, considering how excited I was for 10 when it came out on the PlayStation 2. And I feel like since then it's almost like I've gone into a relationship with all these smaller companies, like, you know, Atlas or Namco Bandai or Axis, Xseed, all these companies, right? And they're like my new boyfriends or girlfriends or whatever. And I don't know, I kind of feel like I just left Square Enix in the dust. It depends though, you know, but I mean, like, in terms of JRPGs, you know, I lost my enthusiasm, and I'm not gonna wish for something that I may or may not get, you know. Having those kinds of expectations for something that's already disappointed so many people, in the past, and to such great extents, I tend to try to not have any expectations, and if something surprising happens, it happens, you know, maybe we'll get back together.
So is Bravely Default the Square Enix, like, baby, please take me back? Like,
yeah.
plea?
You know, it's fun because, like, I haven't beaten the game yet, whereas, like, there's other games that I'm playing right now that I'm, like, blazing through, and I really love Bravely Default a lot, but I think I have this sort of hesitancy because I've had such a rocky relationship with Square Enix. So, yeah, I mean, like, what was the developer for Bravely Default? I don't remember the name of the developer, and what do you know? Because it's not Square Enix.
Well, I thought that it was like
subsidiary or something.
Yeah, I thought that it was just like a studio within Square Enix, sort of like they did with what was
For Heroes of Light?
No. Well, but there was a company, a developer that worked on Tobal No. 1 and 2 and Erguys, and they were under Square, but they weren't. They had their own name, and it really upsets me that I can't think of it. But I thought it was one of those things.
Bravely Default was made by the same guys as 3D Dot Game Heroes, Silicon Studio.
Oh, really?
Huh. Yeah.
3D Dot Game Heroes is good.
They were really good at like that game in particular did a pretty good job and it took an interesting direction, and like I don't know, like, how would I put this? I can't talk now. I'm having a total brain fart. I can't stop thinking about Square Enix now and how I want to get back together with them. So. Yeah, no, I like 3D Dot Heroes because it was trying to be like an homage to the past. And I mean, Bravely Default is obviously an homage as well, right? So, yeah, I don't know. Let's hope. Let's hope something surprising and amazing happens.
So I wrote an article, like, when I did my retrospective about 5 fixes for Final Fantasy. I don't necessarily want to rehash those, but I think I've kind of, like, these are just like 5 ideas, but I think I've kind of amended it into an actual strategy. And I think what Square Enix needs to do, they need to really take a step backward, or they need to like take a step back and evaluate, but also look back the way that Nintendo did with Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds, which, I mean, that's definitely a case of Nintendo being like, you know what? let's go revisit what we used to do and see how those things worked. And in doing so, we're going to come up with a really awesome new game. I think that this would be, well, after 15, I think it would be a perfect time for them to put out a game that is more traditional, sort of like Final Fantasy IX was back in the PS1 days, where it was them kind of pressing pause on the series before like moving forward in a new direction. I would almost love to see a game that the main characters are totally like, I mean, they'd have names and stuff, of course, and personalities, but they would be, fighter and black mage and thief, and they would evolve into those higher jobs as you went. But, bring back some of the core tenets of the series that used to be there, like the fantasy stuff. I, for one, think it would be really cool to bring back the overworld. I remember like watching a friend play WoW, and they were like really high level, so they had like one of the flying mounts, and I thought it was so amazing that you could navigate this 3D world, from the air and have the whole world just like unfold under you, because Final Fantasy XI actually loads between zones, but WoW is an actual seamless world. And just imagine like the PlayStation 4, where you actually do get to leave a town, and here's this expansive place to explore, and you do get an airship again, because that's been gone since Final Fantasy X. As far as, I mean, there are airships, but they're really just like fast travel things. I think bringing back that sense of exploration would be great, and I'm willing to take a hit in graphical fidelity, to give me a bigger place to explore. And it needn't be, like a 60 or 70 or 100 hour long game. If you can give me a fantastic 40-hour game that lets me explore and, play around with inventory and side quests and stuff like that, like, I'm all for that. But they also need, go ahead, Patrick.
I think it could be done, because I see like Black Flag, where you get to have your battleship the entire time, and you get to upgrade it and everything, and that world is humongous. I think a lot of this, you could, almost like copy off of it in some ways, and just flip the battleship upside down and make it into an airship.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I'm not suggesting like go back to like the super deformed characters where it's really tiny. I mean, have them be the full characters, and maybe when you go into battle, like it just like zooms really close in, or maybe you actually play behind the back like you do in Assassin's Creed. I'm all for that. If you give me a Final Fantasy game that's as big as Assassin's Creed 4, sold. They're sold for me anyway, but, I think that's really appealing. But I don't want them to try to, work in some of this stuff that I don't think works in it. Like, what I've noticed with like Lightning Returns is they've been bringing in like a lot of, stuff from like the MMO school of thought. And I really do feel that that's no good. Like, having like a list of quests in your log and you're just trying to like check them off a list. Like, that's not how the games used to be. Like, you used to just like do stuff because that's how the game progressed, or there was stuff on the side. We called them side quests, but it wasn't like a thing with like, oh, hey, there's a guy with an exclamation point over his head. Let me go talk to him and then go get his 10 of whatever. That's not fun gameplay. The only reason that works in the MMO space is because they need you to play the game for long periods of time and keep coming back. It doesn't really work in a single player space, and I think that they need to really look back before they start moving forward.
Yeah, just like that, moving backward, I'd like them to go to the way that they used to tell stories with like Final Fantasy IX. I've been thinking about all the characters and Final Fantasy X also, where they've been named like after different aspects of their life and their emotions and their personalities, and it adds like a whole other depth to the story that they're also able to show on multiple levels throughout the storytelling, be it like literal, metaphoric, allegoric, and they used to do like all of those things at once, I felt like, and sometimes now it just feels like an action movie. Like in 13.
Yeah. I mean, I would like to definitely see, I mean, I didn't have any problems with the cast of Final Fantasy 13. Angela, I know you would disagree. I actually liked Vanille. I liked everybody in that game. I just didn't like the story. But I'd like to see them go back to like a larger cast of characters, because I think back to like Final Fantasy 4 and 6, and those games had a ton of characters, but they were still very well realized. But I also, and I'm pretty sure I've said this on the show before, it's time for them to try something bold and ballsy with the look of the game. Instead of trying to go for these, like, beautiful, like, totally photorealistic visuals, like, they need their Wind Waker. They need that game in the series that stands apart from everything else and makes people, like, stop and take notice, where it's like, whoa, what is that? You know, a game where you see screenshots and you're like, oh, wow, that is, you know, like, once you know what it is, it's like, oh, that's Final Fantasy, because nothing else looks like that.
Yeah, well, there's other forms of beauty. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was really curious though. You want them to go cel shaded?
I want them to go in any art style that isn't what they've been doing for the last, like, 13 years. I think I've said this before, but I would love to see them bring Amano back and actually do, like, an actual 3D rendition of his art. Because his character designs have never been able to be realized in video game form. Like, they've always been more like guidelines, because you just really couldn't replicate his stuff, you know, in the medium, but you can now, and I think that'd be really cool. Or, and I think this is actually the better course of action, get a completely new artist, someone who's never worked on the series before. And while you're at it, get a new producer, a new director, a new writer, you know, let's bring in, like, completely new blood. Because the only other thing that I would really want is if you bring the band back together and have them do, like, a really awesome 3DS game.
Well, eventually they're gonna have to. I mean, these people are getting older, you know, like, people are gonna have to retire, and someone will have to take their place, so.
Yeah, and I just wonder who those people are. I do think that Katase and Nomura have been working on this series for far too long, and it's time for somebody new.
I was waiting for you to say that.
Yeah, I don't want to beat the Nomura thing to death because I've talked about it way too often on this podcast, but holy crap. Like,
how long has it been without you mentioning him, though? I think I lost the bet.
I restrained myself.
You did well.
Erika, where do you weigh in on Nomura? Because I know where everybody else does, but what do you feel about his character designs? Like, do you still love them, or are they?
They all look the same to me. They all look the same. There's nothing to, like, there's, like, he makes them look a little different from each other, but for the most part, they all look like their brother and sister or something, you know? Like, no offense, but, like, they look so similar. There's nothing distinct about it anymore. Maybe at first, but it's tried and true, you know? It's flat now, unfortunately. There comes a point where it's like you can almost have too much of a certain good thing, you know? And I feel like he kind of is just overkill. I definitely want to see something else, stylistically. I think that would be very refreshing. And we've seen it done before, and we've seen it done successfully, so why not this?
Absolutely. I actually have had a lot of, like, fantasies lately of them doing a sprite-based Final Fantasy game for the 3DS, because I think they could play with that really well. Where, yeah, it's 2D sprites, but they're doing, like, really interesting stuff with the 3D slider. And the reason I've been thinking about it lately is because they have been teasing me for the last, like, year and a half or so. They've proven to me they still have amazing sprite artists working at that company. Because if you played Final Fantasy ATB for iPhone, when I did, and I will defend it because I love that game, seeing, like, the 3D characters rendered in the classic 16-bit style is so cool. And then they did just recently that recap of Final Fantasy 13 and 13-2 in 16-bit sprite form, and it's like, come on, guys, like, you can still do this. Like, give me that. I mean, don't give me exactly that. I mean, because that's they were very much using the Final Fantasy 6 like sprite style. Give me sprite art, but do new sprite art. But I think that'd be really cool too. And I think it might be time for the series to maybe withdraw from the bleeding edge, and maybe, you know, Dragon Quest did that. There's no shame in that. I think Dragon Quest 9 is one of the best games in the series. I don't think there's anything wrong with moving the series into the portable space and making less ambitious, but just as fun games. And maybe Bravely Default is that, and maybe that's going to be a new franchise for the portables. You know, I think we'll probably get a Bravely Default 2, but, you know, I definitely wouldn't mind if Final Fantasy 16 was on the Vita or the 3DS or something like that. I would buy a Vita to play Final Fantasy 16.
Yeah, I would too.
Luckily, I already got mine.
I saw that.
Very pleased with it. Yeah.
Gonna play all those great games like. And no, I'm just
You're terrible.
What's gonna happen?
Patapon's awesome, right?
Well, Patapon was PSP.
Oh,
What was that one that you just played, Erika? The Trigger. Oh goodness, I can't think of the name of it now.
Danganronpa, Trigger Happy Havoc.
There it
There's
is.
actually a lot of great games on the Vita now, and a lot I'm looking forward to. I mean, Conception 2 is going to be coming out.
That's right.
I have memories of Celceta at home already. I'm going to replay Danganronpa because my boyfriend ended up getting all of my trophies because you can't have more than one user on one Vita, which is stupid. And yeah. Oh, Virtue's Last Reward. And
all those free PS Plus games.
There are those as well.
Gravity Rush, like that's definitely one that I want to play. Yeah.
That's a really pretty game. Yeah, there's more. So I figured at this point, I kind of realized that it's about time. Persona 4 Golden, there's plenty of reason I think right now to get a Vita, but not even a couple months ago, right? Like, I felt like it's finally built up enough. Oh, you know what I really want to play? Final Fantasy Type 0. I hear there's a fan translation that just wrapped up, and I'm really curious to see it because I hear it's an amazing game.
I heard really good things about that too.
Now that is weird because I remembered reading a story that said that they had Type 0 running in HD, and I totally expected them to either release it in the States on the Vita or the PS3 or both, and I'm surprised that hasn't happened.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, I would definitely be in for that. But also, and since we're talking about, like, I think that the Vita would be the best way to experience Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9 again, because playing them, like, I think that those games don't hold up well on, blown up to like a, 42-inch or 50-inch screen, but if you put them on, like,
verify that.
Yeah, but if you put them on a PS Vita screen, like, yeah, totally.
I'm gonna download so many games. Sorry.
Man, now I kind of want to get a Vita. I haven't done my taxes yet. I've got a refund coming. Oh, well, last year I bought my 3DS. But, I don't know, Angelo, you and Patrick haven't really weighed in too much on fixing it. I mean, did you kind of just,
Oh, mine was the way the storytelling has sort of gone down a little bit.
That's true, yeah. And I would agree with you. I mean, I think that the 13 story is completely nonsensical, and a lot of that has to do with, like, the ridiculous jargon they came up with. And also the fact that all the games seem to, like, start you in the middle of the story, and then you have to play catch up. Mm-hmm. I had no idea what was going on in Lightning Returns for the first couple hours, and that was really frustrating.
Yeah, I think they need to work on engaging the player in ways that aren't just visual. I don't mean that in a slight, but I mean, we talked about the Final Fantasy 13 engine, and we talked about how I am not a huge fan of it. I don't outright hate the game. Let me just put that out there. I mean, I beat it. I didn't beat 8 and I didn't beat 2, so. I just think a lot of times it gets, you made a point about it having some element of strategy to it, and I'll get you that, but basically you're doing one of two things in combat. You are either changing your character's, job, we'll call it, or whatever they called it, paradigm, or you're and hitting auto battle, or you are performing Libra. And you don't actually do any of the actions. Very rarely do you select an individual action for one of your characters to perform. And I just think that that's not engaging enough mentally. I think they just need to get back to that a little bit. And I think the reason that they don't is because they're scared of scaring off the crowd that's into the cinematic element of the game. And I think you can have both as long as you do it right. There is absolutely nothing wrong with having a cinematic experience. There is nothing wrong with having segments of the game that are, kind of on autopilot, but I think the core of the game itself needs to make you think on the fly quickly and have a lot more to juggle than just a few job classes and things like that.
I would love to remedy that by like using the PlayStation camera or the Kinect or something to give sound controls to each character, like be like potion.
Mass Effect 3 called, Patrick. They want their idea back. No, I don't know. That could be cool. I mean, actually, Erika, you mentioning the 2-player mode on Final Fantasy VI, that could be something that they could try to evaluate again. I'd love to see them go back to having a larger party.
Yeah.
I was really bummed when it went down to 3 party members for Final Fantasy VII, and then that became the norm. My favorite, party, of course, is 4, where you have 5 people. That's an amazing amount of strategy. And my favorite parts of Final Fantasy 12 are when you have a guest character in your party. So you actually do have 4 characters, just one that you can't control. It just made the game feel a lot more strategic and just fuller. And, now we're down to just one character. And I don't know about 15. I feel like 15 is also a game where you're only controlling one guy. So that doesn't thrill me. 4 people minimum, please.
I think part of the adventurous element of Final Fantasy has always been about that party aspect. And I think if you reduce it to one player, that sucks a lot of the life out of it. Just because there isn't that inter-party dynamic. Even in games where it's a job, and we basically alluded to the fact that the job, based games don't necessarily have the best character development or story just by their nature. But even then you're developing a synergy within your party just in the kind of jobs and the way that they work with each other and things like that. And in the other games, the synergy comes from the way the party interacts with each other. But when it's a solo character talking to people on their cell phone or whatever, I mean, that just it's not the same.
I can testify to that, because listening to Lightning talk to Hope, and only Hope, for 10 hours is just awful.
Kind of all the characters' Hope.
Yes.
Sorry. To be fair, I didn't really like any of the characters except for Lightning, so.
I mean, yeah, I think Fang was probably my least favorite one. I know she's a lot of people's favorites, but I actually thought that Vanille had a lot of depth to her character as you got later on into the game. She was just a happy character she was a sad character putting on a happy front, for a large part of that game, and, I thought it worked.
Comedians are,
What's that?
That's how most comedians are.
Yeah.
That's what I liked about her.
I mean, come on, Angelo, you didn't like Zaz?
Oh, okay, yes, I liked Zaz, but he was there. He felt like he was put there for amusement, except for that bit of an arc that he had involving his son. So, I don't know. He didn't feel like he was a main character or enough of a main character, I guess. Like, he felt, I don't know. I guess that's weird, a weird thing to say, but
I just liked the idea of having a character that was getting too old for this shit.
He also had a chocobo in his hair. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing. I always wanted that, and I never got to see it before. I never knew I wanted it until I saw it, but I wanted it. I mean, he had tons of untapped potential.
That's another thing that I think that they've gotten away from. And again, I've read this in interviews where Kitase himself has said that they are specifically catering towards like the Japanese teenage boy. So they don't want to have older characters and stuff like that, because depending on who you talk to, in Final Fantasy 12, the protagonist was either going to be Bosch or Balthier, which are 2 of the older characters in the party, but they decided that they were both too old to be the main characters, so then they came up with Vaughn and his nice little half vest and his plucky devil-may-care attitude. And I thought Balthier was one of the best characters,
I love Balthier.
Period. Yeah. And if the game was about him, like, Bosch, maybe not so much, but either of them would have been, I think, better as a central character. But I think that speaks volumes for where the company is. Again, going back to games like 4 and 6, where you have, grizzled old Tella, or you have Cyan from 6, who is well into his 40s. He's probably closer to 50. and one of the most charming characters in that game. I'd definitely like to see some more diversity. Both, I mean, all the way around, you know, gender, age, race, like, they need to explore some more of that. It's weird that there's only 2 black characters in the entire series.
Yeah, that is actually really weird. What?
I didn't even realize that until you said that, but you're absolutely right, and that is strange.
Yep, especially with the first one being, like, total Ebonic speaking, you know, Barrett. Like,
yeah.
A little bit embarrassing to go back and play that one. So yeah, I guess that's kind of where we're at, you know, with the series and where it should go. But, we would be remiss in leaving this podcast without talking about music. And
I would yell at you.
I know that your head would explode if we just wrapped it up now. So yeah, I mean, music has always been a very important part of this series. Especially in the older days where the music was kind of the sole way to really convey the emotion that was going on screen. So I would be remiss in doing this podcast without talking about some of our favorite tracks and how, you know, what that means to us. So Angelo, go ahead.
Yeah. How much time do we have?
It's gonna, I knew it was gonna be a long one. It's fine.
Okay. I'll try and, I mean, gosh, I don't even know if I could pick favorite tracks without, like, I almost want to go game by game and go, this is my favorite track from this game, and this is my favorite one from this game.
You can't? That's what I'm doing.
That's what I'm going to do then. One would be the hardest one because there's so much amazing music. I mean, that's where you establish the opening theme with that arpeggio thing that kind of, they later added a melody to it. And also, just so much of it has come back and become, like, established in the franchise, where you have, the other opening theme that played during the title sequence. And I hate to do this, but I don't know if it's the one that goes da na 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 na.
Oh,
and that
was going to be the one, Angela, that I talked about because that used to be titled Main Theme of Final Fantasy. And, like, I always remember it as being the song that starts off your quest on Final Fantasy IV, because when Kain and Cecil leave the castle to go on their adventure, that's what plays, and it used to be a big part of all the soundtracks, and then right around Final Fantasy VII, it started to disappear, and to the point that when they wove it into the intro of Final Fantasy XII, I got a little teary-eyed because I'd missed it for so long.
Well, it was in 9 too, I think.
It probably had some sort of, like, little callback. I honestly don't remember the soundtrack to 9 very much. I've only played that one once, even though it was by far my favorite game on the PlayStation.
Yeah.
I just, for some reason, I haven't gone back to it. I don't know why.
Right. Yeah. Then there was the battle music, which I would love to hear. I'm sure somebody has. I'm going to look on YouTube later for somebody doing a cover of that, like with electric guitars, and just metal it out or whatever. But that has a really good battle theme. All the Final Fantasy games have really good battle themes, but this one also established the anthem, the victory anthem that keeps coming back. Also, the opening to it, there was like a dramatic, like, upswing, that kind of thing, comes back in a bunch of them. It was gone for a while, then it came back in 9. It's in 14 again, I believe. They bring that back?
Yeah, kind of. The cool thing about 14 is that, the battle music doesn't necessarily end when the battle does anymore. Yeah. Because if you chain into another fight, it picks back up. So sometimes it'll kind of start to fade out, and then it'll fade back in and stuff. It's really cool.
Oh, that is cool. I want to play 14. Awesome. I don't have time to play 14, but I want to play 14.
Play with us.
Play with us.
let's see. I mean, and I don't have too much. I mean, that's kind of one. One is so good, and there's so much of it that they keep going back to, and there's a reason for that, because they're just simple melodies that were designed to fit within like a minute time span, so they had to be good, and you had to be able to listen to them over and over and over again without getting sick of them. And you honestly don't, which is fantastic. 2, I think the castle theme, that you hear very early in the game, just is fantastic. But I didn't play a whole lot of 2 because it's terrible, so. Yeah. And you know what's funny is I actually can't come up with one that I really like on 3, but it has a really good soundtrack too. 4's, what? Go ahead.
There's that one that Uematsu always picks, in his compilations. It's, I think it's Dear Friends?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. But then moving on, if you move on to 4, there's so much good music in 4. So much good music in Final Fantasy IV. The world map theme, there's the battle theme, there's, goodness, I might save that one for you, Julian, though. I think there's just, I just remember, like, entering a cave, like, the first time, and just thinking, man, even the cave music is good, Just a little first dungeon thing that you have to go through or whatever it was. But let's see here. 5, there's that, I want to say it's even called like Going on an Adventure or something corny like that. And it's a corny little upbeat, like, tune. And it's so happy and it's so plucky and it's so Final Fantasy V. That's just a really good track. 6, jeez, the opera theme, Terra's theme,
Dancing Mad,
yeah, Kafka's theme, for that matter, is so delightfully evil.
Yeah.
I would like to point out real quick, because I was lucky enough to get to go to one of the Distant Worlds concerts where Uematsu was actually conducting, and we did a Q&A with him after the show, and someone asked him if he had to choose, like, what was his favorite piece that he'd ever composed, and he said that it was the ending theme to Final Fantasy VI, and that he would love to do that for the show one day, and the other composer, or the maestro asked him, well, I mean, how long is that track? And he's like, oh, it's only about 18 minutes long. And he was like, you would kill us.
Yep. Yeah, because he beautifully strings together so much of that game in that last few minutes, it's almost 20 minutes long. But, all the character themes bubble up and then go back down, and, it's fantastic. I know you're not a big fan of 7, Julian.
All I said was that I think that the 7 soundtrack doesn't hold up to some of his other soundtracks as well.
And I made this argument, and I think if you listen to a lot of live versions of it, or even if you listen to like chiptune versions of it, I think the biggest struggle with that is just the voices that they used, or the sound font, or whatever you want to call it. I think the music itself holds up fantastically. I still love that fighting thing, the battle theme.
The man with the machine gun?
That's 8.
That's 8.
Yeah.
No, the battle theme for 7, I don't know what it's called, but it's just the standard fight one is just it just rocks.
I mean, the boss music is one of my favorite ones, of all time, to the point that, I mean, if I had to gain the recent PC release, it's the fact that the music isn't mixed very well, and that particular boss theme is very muffled, and I was like, just destroyed, because that guitar riff is so good, and then hearing it so muted in that PC version, it made me sad.
Yeah.
And of course, we mentioned One Winged Angel. I mean, that thing is on a completely different level, to the point that if you go to Video Games Live with Tommy Tallarico, like, he introduces the song and says, I really don't even need to say it, but I want to hear it, and then he gets the entire audience to yell out One Winged Angel, because everybody knows what's coming.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, let the battles begin. Or let the battles begin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a good one.
That was a good one. And I think Eris, or whatever you want to call her, theme in 7 is great. I think it's perfect for her character, perfectly suited for it. Like, it's got that tragedy sound to it. Like, when she dies and the theme plays, it's like, oh, Yeah, that's why she had such a melancholy theme the whole time for this moment, you know? And, it's been setting you up the whole time, staring you dead in the face. And, then it just plays. I love the world map theme for 7. Some people really don't. I really like it. I actually think it's one of his best ones. 8 too. I mean, 8 I think is his most passionate one. I think, maybe 6 is his best. I don't know. I hate to make things like this is the best or whatever, but I really feel like he poured himself into 8. I wish I liked it more than I did. It's not that I don't like 8. It's just, you know, probably the game holds it back a little bit for me too, because I just have so much, I got so bored with 8.
And with the machine gun though, Patrick's right.
And with the machine gun though.
Yeah, I love that song, especially in theater rhythm. It just got me so jazzed to play it every single time.
And I must have watched that opening movie a million times. I know it's almost too much with the Latin and the whole washing on the shore, but I don't care. It's so good.
I am such a pushover for Latin in music. Like, Jesus.
Yep. And it's a little bit on the pretentious side, but dude, you can do that. Go ahead.
Yeah, he did it just fine.
Yep, I like it plenty. I do like a lot of the music in 8. Of course, 9. And when we talked about the callbacks, there's so many callbacks in 9 that I kind of already are spoiled. But that I think has the best world map theme in the whole franchise. I love that. I also like the battle theme too. But just that song while you're exploring the overworld, it feels, I've said this before, and I think even musically it sounds this way too. I feel like they knew that the franchise was going to change direction after 9, and it sounds so much like a send-off. Like, even that, there's this adventurous but like a melancholy tone, like, there's a bit of saying goodbye in it.
Oh, absolutely, because, I mean, that game wasn't even conceived as a mainline Final Fantasy game originally. It was just going to be this thing for, you know, Sakaguchi and Amano and Uematsu to work on one last thing.
Yep.
And then it became Final Fantasy IX, and I'm glad that it did, because it is that, you know, when I wrote about it, I talked about it being like, you know, the last time that the band was together.
Yep, and that's exactly what the soundtrack sounds like, and I could go through, I don't think there's a track in that I don't like, even the corny ones. You know what I mean? Because the corny ones are delightfully corny. But that, I could stand on the map and listen to that loop for a good amount of time if I really felt like it, you know? And then there's 10, which I don't have a whole lot of experience with, but man, that piano piece that I mentioned before is so good.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. I think a piano really lends itself well to this kind of music, because the music is all, like, a lot of it's very bittersweet. And the tone of a piano is kind of bittersweet as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, I almost felt that same sense of majesty, and it was sort of created by the tone at the beginning of 10 too, because like that I felt at the beginning of 7, because it was such a leap in graphical technology and everything, and it coupled itself so gracefully with that piano. That, yeah, I couldn't get over it.
Yeah. Goodness. Let's see what else. After that, after 10 was 11, which I will let you talk about, because I had very little experience with that musically, and I didn't really like it a whole lot. I'm sorry. I didn't hate it. But none of the music, I know. I think a lot of it comes from you having a much broader experience than I did, and I was stuck listening to the same 2 tracks like over and over and over again throughout most of my experience, and the bagpipes just droning kind of. It grated on me after a while. I'm sorry.
But one of those tracks is one of my all-time favorite Final Fantasy songs, and that's The Forest of Ronfar. Like, straight up. And it has become one of the most popular pieces of Uematsu's. And it's the only piece from Final Fantasy XI that usually ends up in the Distant Worlds concert. For that reason.
Huh.
11 usually gets the short shrift when they're talking about the franchise. Like, that's why, like, in Dissidia, you only get like Shantoto in there, and then same thing with Theat Rhythm, that Final Fantasy 11 is just kind of like this afterthought. It's kind of sad.
Yeah, I don't know
But
how you
understandable.
do that though, because you make your own character. So anyway.
Oh, but there's plenty of memorable characters from 11, like Sid or Gilgamesh or Lion, or Prince Treon. I mean, there's a ton of really cool characters. 11 has a really good story. It is a Final Fantasy game through and through.
Yeah. I love 12. It has a totally different feel from the rest of the games, but it's got the Ivalice feel. And it's an Ivalice soundtrack. I mean, it sounds like Final Fantasy Tactics. It sounds like everything else that the guy whose name I cannot think of right now has done.
You talking about the composer or the...
Yes.
Oh, I
can't remember his name.
I can remember Matsuno, but I always forget the composer, and I should remember him because I love him.
He has a very, very distinct sound to all of his work, and it is a very good sound. I like that one a lot. I think the one that, and I can't remember the name of it either, but when you're exploring the field outside of the town, and I don't remember what it was, but it had like cat toys everywhere, and it was probably one of the first times you really got to explore. That's the one that just kind of keeps coming back to my head for that one. I don't even know if it's the best one on the soundtrack. Like I said, I lost the ability to play it. So my experience with that was limited to 13, Lightning's, the battle theme, which has Lightning's name in it, actually. What's it called? Blinded by Light, I think?
Yeah.
Very good.
But I know what your favorite track from 13 is, Angelo.
Do you?
Yeah.
What? Actually, I do like that one, kind of.
Oh, I thought you hated it. I was trying to troll you.
It just, no, I like that. That's not my favorite one, but it's not a bad one. It actually has the most distinct melody of all the songs on there, really. So I can't hate it too much because I like distinct melody in the soundtrack. So, but yeah, and then the little bit I've heard of 14 is the beginning theme. And actually, I think the only one I heard was the vocal version, which is so good. If you haven't heard
good stuff.
If you haven't heard the vocal version of that, go do it. I don't know if it's actually in the game, but it's really good. So, and I heard there's a lot of really good music in that one, so I'm kind of looking at, I wish I had some time to dive into that soundtrack before we recorded so I could give you a better opinion on it. But yeah, I don't want to play 14. I'm done.
Very good.
Sorry.
I don't really have as much as either of our other two friends here, Julian, so I just wanted to quickly say I can't really say it better than Angelo, so I don't want to hold up too much time, but I do love the Genova theme in Final Fantasy VII. It's one of my favorites, especially because when I played Theater Rhythm, you have to unlock it with like a dark note in the Chaos Shrine. And it's like one of the harder ones to get, and it goes so fast, and you really feel like you achieved something, and it's all going like doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo, and like freaking you out because it goes so fast like that, and in the background there's all the biochemicals and stuff of Genova going around, and that freaks you out even further, and then you complete it and you feel like you accomplished something.
I love how unnatural that theme is too, because it's perfect for Genova.
Yeah.
It's got the electronic element to it, it's got the mechanical element to it, but it's got that it's got a weird tone to it. It's got an unnatural sound that totally works. I like that a lot.
And then when you finish it in Theater Rhythm, you unlock Journey.
Oh yeah?
Anybody? No?
No? Because
Genova Chen. Oh.
Oh, jeez.
Oh.
It's not funny if you have to explain it.
Yeah, sorry.
I get it now. Don't worry. Ha 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 ha.
There, that's what I wanted.
It's so funny.
Yeah.
I tried, damn it.
You should have seen Genova's chin.
Pun is one of the highest forms of humor.
Oh boy.
Did you have others, Patrick, or was that the one you wanted to highlight?
the other was the man with the machine gun, but I did, honestly, I did not put as much thought into that part of it as I did with the characters, just because I played mostly theater rhythm when I was figuring out what my favorite songs were, and those were the two that I really kept coming back to. Even though I like a lot of the other, like, slower themes, like the world map themes and stuff like that, none of them really made a dent in my mind like the Man with the Machine Gun and Genova do. I mean, of course, One Winged Angel, but I honestly think I like Genova more in that entry. Then the only other thing about music in Final Fantasy I really gotta say that it hasn't been said better by Angelo is, or just hasn't been said by him, is like the theme music for me personally was like, or like the title screen music of like Final Fantasy VII, and it sort of like flows over to the other titles, was just something that sets the tone for every one of the entries in the series, and it just makes me feel like home or something.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Erika, how about you? I know we've mentioned a lot and you've chimed in, but I'm sure you have some that we haven't talked about.
Yeah, it's funny. For the most part, I typically like the piano collections more. But there are a few where I do prefer the orchestrated. I think, so I have a list here, so I'm like super prepared so I can fly through these. But for Final Fantasy IV, and I mean, I'm just gonna say right now, cause I'm just gonna name these off, but for me, they all have a common theme in that, for the most part, they're all just really bittersweet. And that's kind of why I like the piano collections too. And that's why I own all the piano collections for 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, is because it's really good at offering that bittersweet sound. So it lends itself so well. But I know in Final Fantasy IV, I really like the theme of love. That was a really beautiful song. Yeah, such a delicate, pure song. Really beautiful.
I forgot to mention that.
Taught to children in Japan, by the way, like for music classes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I wish I would have learned that as a child. For Final Fantasy VI, that one was by far my favorite in 4. I don't think it could top that for me. For Final Fantasy VI, it was all about the themes. I loved Terra's theme. And actually Terra's theme I liked better, orchestrated. The piano, it could only do so much with it, right? So I don't know, in comparison, but I also really liked, Celis's theme. And then, of course, Kefka's theme, because of how maniacal it is, and it just replicates him so well. For 7, definitely One Winged Angel, but orchestrated, obviously. And Tifa's theme, which I liked a lot better with piano. It was a really beautiful song, a really, really nice, very sensitive song. For Final Fantasy VIII, I really liked Eyes on Me.
Oh, yeah.
That's a beautiful song. I actually prefer that song in the piano version. One version that I kind of feel bad that I don't like, because I know a lot of people like this, was the version by Faye Wong, the vocal version. I
agree with you.
It just sounded so cheesy to me. Mm-hmm. It didn't work. But if you hear just the instrumentals, it's really beautiful. So,
love them both.
Yeah. Blue Fields was another really good one for 8. And then, of course, the opener, Liberi Fatali. I swear, honestly, guys, I'm in the exact same boat as you. I watched that opener so many times. I did like a cosplay of Renoa and everything, so I had to keep looking at the back of her duster so I could see the wing pattern, so I could make sure I could do it right when I was making it. So I don't even want to know how many times I watched that just to be sure. For Final Fantasy IX, I really liked Eternal Harvest. That was a really beautiful song, but my favorite by far was Unforgettable Sorrow. really beautiful one. I prefer piano for Final Fantasy IX, but what's really funny about Unforgettable Sorrow is it sounds so much like Suteki Nade in Final Fantasy X. Like, it's really uncanny when you listen to it because it sounds so much like it. It's really weird. I definitely, if you know 10, then listen to it and you'll be like, oh, whoa. It's so strange. In 10, definitely, like, I swear, like, the whole soundtrack for 10, I could just listen to front and back. I like how it was solely piano. It kind of worked well with a piano. And it just, the way it worked off of that was amazing. But yeah, Suteki Nade, I really like that. Both vocals, orchestrated, and with the piano. It was just beautiful all around. And I loved that scene in the game too, actually. It always makes me think of that. But I also really like Xanarkand. Xanarkand is just such a beautiful song. And yeah, I mean, you know, it's funny. Like, I just couldn't really get into I didn't play 11 or 14, unfortunately. But with 12, I don't know. There was nothing that really stood out to me, even though I do like the composer and I liked his work in Tactics. But the thing with his work is there's nothing for me that really stands out compared to Nobuo's works. So in terms of 13, I honestly haven't played enough of it. So it's one of those games where it was actually the first Final Fantasy where I didn't get it on release. So, well, not on release, like right away, I mean, where I was actually like excited for it, right? Like, oh my god, I gotta get this, you know, like after I started getting into the series. I was just not excited for it, but I want to be. I want to like actually play it and hopefully enjoy the music and characters. So we'll have to see.
Yeah, I think there's some really good tracks in 13. I think some of the better ones get used a little too often to where you kind of get a little sick of them by the end, but I still think it's got a pretty good soundtrack, especially for not being one of Uematsu's works. I think for me, I mean, honestly, like, there are very few tracks that I would ever say, like, I didn't care for, I don't like as much. I mean, I love, you know, pretty much everything. I think my weakest entry is Final Fantasy V, and I think that's part of the reason why I've never finished that game, is that the music doesn't pull me through it as much as the other 16-bit games. So, I mean, I'll just kind of reiterate, like, what you guys have all said, but I'll kind of throw out some of the quirkier ones. I definitely like some of the, like, specific town themes, and one of my all-time favorites is the town of Mysidia in Final Fantasy IV, because of the boop boop. I just love that. When I would play it with my cousin David, his favorite city was Fabul, and then mine was Mysidia. So we would always have to get the airship, and we'd go to Fabul and just listen to that track for a really long time. And then I'd have to take the ship over to Mysidia so I could listen to that track for a really long time because we just loved them so much. Going to 6, I mean, you guys mentioned like the big ones. I will say that like the overworld map for the World of Ruin, which is just basically like a funeral dirge, is just amazing and so indicative of that last half of the game. But also, again, going to like the quirky Spinach Time Rag, especially on the piano collection, Erika, like, I love that one. It's such a neat little tune, and it's so, you only hear it like twice, you know, in that game. Like, it's a very rare track. But used to great effect. Yeah, I do think, you know, like 7, we mentioned like a lot of the big ones. I think the boss theme is probably one of my favorites, besides One Winged Angel, because again, Latin. I mean, the fact that like the last boss basically has his own theme song, is kind of amazing to me. And then I think, you know, the 8 soundtrack in hindsight is one of his best. You know, we've already mentioned like some of my favorite tracks from it. 9, honestly, I don't remember a lot of the music from 9. And again, that's only because I haven't played it since 2000. So it's a little foggy. 10, I'm definitely a big fan of like some of the vocal stuff. So I love, like the Blitzball song with like in that verse, like cutscene where they introduce Blitzball, where it's like all like metal. I love that track. I love Suteki Dane. That's, like I said, I mean, I guess, I don't think I mentioned this on the show, but I saw a commercial for Final Fantasy X HD, like on the Sony website, and they were playing that song, and I started to get emotional. I was like, oh, I just love it so much. But then again, 11 has like a ton of music that I love, but Ronfar is, you know, and I mentioned this on an episode of Digital Mystery Tour back when we were still doing that, RIP, but that is a song that reminds me of home, because, you know, I would go venturing out into the wilderness of Vanadil for days, literal days, and then when I would come back on Chocobo and hear Ronfar, I'd say, I'm home. And again, going back to some of those memorable moments playing that game hot and heavy, that's just a very special theme for me. Also, like, the intro, like, for the CG for that game is really great. And some of the stuff that you get into, like, in, like, the Chains of Prometheus stuff is really great. So, yeah, I mean, big ups to that soundtrack. But, Eric, I'm kind of in the same boat with you on Final Fantasy 12, where, other than the intro track, which kind of brought back, like, the main theme of Final Fantasy, at least for a little bit, there's not a lot that I really remember. Other than, like, I think the town music in the first town, is very memorable to me. And I think it's because I spent so much time in that town. Cause I got really sucked into that game trying to do the hunts. So. Yeah. So I definitely have fond memories of that. And then 13, I mean, this track that I was trolling Angelo on, I actually really do love. And the battle theme is amazing. So yeah. And 14, I just haven't played enough of to really be able to comment on. Also, just a real quick shout out. I love the intro song and the 1,000 Words vocal tracks from Final Fantasy X too. I think they're fantastic. Especially the Japanese versions. But, yeah, holy crap. It's a lot of music.
It is.
It's a lot of Final Fantasy.
I can't believe I forgot about Theme of Love. That is actually probably my favorite track from Final Fantasy IV. I don't know how that slipped my mind, because I actually wanted to talk about it, because one of the best things about it is how simple it is.
Yeah,
like, there is such restraint in that one. It is just a very simple melody with a very simple string background, but it's like restrained, so full at the same time. I haven't heard anything like that in a video game before then. And it was really impressive. But getting back to the goofy stuff, do you remember, Julian, Matoya's Cave from the original Final Fantasy?
Oh, of course. I love Matoya's Cave.
I love that piece. And it's goofy. It's like bouncy and perky and funny.
The Black Mage's version of it is really good too.
Oh yeah?
If you guys are familiar with Uematsu's like heavy metal band that remixes Final Fantasy tracks, that's a really good one.
Oh, Clash on the Big Bridge. How did we not mention that? Do you know which one I'm talking about?
I know the name.
It's a fantastic. It's the Gilgamesh battle from
5.
I think so. Yes.
That's why, because I don't really.
That is so good. As soon as you mentioned the Black Mages, that's the first thing that came to my mind, because their version of that is epic. But yeah, that's an amazing battle piece too. I'm gonna, you know what? If we don't stop, I'm gonna do this all day.
Yeah, I was gonna say we should probably, you know, like Theme of Love shows a lot of restraint in its orchestration, and we should show some restraint in this podcast, because I'm starting to feel like Jeff Gerstmann all of a sudden. Cause we've now breached the 3-hour mark, which we've never done before. So,
We're done.
Yes.
All time.
But, yeah, before we go, Erika, what have you been up to on your channel that people should check out?
So I have my Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc review that's been up for a while, but I also have my top 5 JRPGs on the Super Nintendo that just went up too. And yeah, people seem to really like my top JRPG lists, so maybe you'd enjoy that one too, or whoever's listening if they like JRPGs, which I'm hoping you like JRPGs if you're listening to this podcast. I have a lot of anime reviews too. I started getting back into those as well, and I have some pretty exciting ones. And yeah, also Final Fantasy X-10-2 HD remaster. Hopefully that comes soon. That'll have to happen soon. So there'll be an unboxing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is going to do it for this lengthy special edition. Well, not special edition, but special format of Nerds Without Pants. Definitely let us know what you thought in the comments. Let us know your favorite games in the series, all that good stuff. Also, what you thought of this, because this is the first time that we've focused on one franchise for an episode of the show, and maybe we could do more of these in the future, if we find something that all of us are really passionate about. Erika, as always, it's wonderful to have you. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me, as
Absolutely.
always.
And, yeah, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up. So you can also find us on the interwebs, on the Twitter. Erika?
Yeah, you can find me at YouTube at youtube.com/Erika Szabo, ErikaSzabo. You can follow me at the same for Twitter, Erika Szabo. I have a Facebook fan page. That's Erika T. Szabo. And yeah, I think that's it.
Excellent. And, Patrick?
I'm at some boss.
Angelo?
I'm at PixelAJ on Twitter, and I'm also on PixlBit, and yeah.
Yeah. And, you can find me on Twitter at Julian_Titus. Check out Angelo, with Backloggers. He's currently doing Alundra. And then, we'll see what we're going to do after that. I might be rejoining the show. We'll see what we want to play. And, yeah, that's it for this episode of Nerds Without Pants. Thank you for powering through and listening to this gargantuan episode. Love that word. I so rarely get to use it in a sentence. For myself, Erika, Patrick, and Angelo, thanks for listening, and keep it pantsless, Internet. Goodbye.
Bye.
All
Work. This
right.
isn't even my final form in there somehow, and I just couldn't figure out how to do it.
3 hours. That would have been good.
Just say it right now, Angelo. I'll put it in the outtakes.
This isn't even my final form.
Show me. You probably shouldn't laugh anymore.
Too funny.
It was your idea.